I'm a 30-something professional. Being in your 30s these days doesn't mean you're an old bachelor anymore. We live in an era where marriage isn't considered a must. I had a girlfriend until last year, but we broke up after I found out she was seeing someone else. Since then, I've been worried about trusting women, but recently, something enjoyable happened. I can't help but live this way, and I thought I'd share that special something here. I live in a small apartment about a 5-minute walk from the subway station. The place is old, but the landlord recently redid the wallpaper and flooring, so it's quite clean. I'm pretty experienced in living on my own, so I manage well. Since moving in, I've fixed the undersink cabinet and the shoe rack by myself, and even managed to completely remove the mold in the bathroom. One weekend, as I was relaxing and watching TV, the lady from next door knocked on my door. She appeared to be in her 50s and asked if I had a monkey wrench because she needed to replace her shower head, but couldn't find one at the local hardware store. I had a set of tools and lent her the wrench. About an hour later, she returned it, thanking me, and handed me a bag of garlic baguettes she bought from the bakery in front of our building. It's nothing, we're neighbors after all, I said, trying to refuse the gift, but she insisted, holding my hand tightly. My husband is too lazy to fix anything. I asked him to buy a wrench, but he forgot and just slept all day. I fixed the shower myself. My friends' husbands change light bulbs and do repairs without a fuss. She seemed quite talkative. I thanked her for the food and went back to my room. I ended up falling asleep while watching YouTube, and before I knew it, it was evening. I was too lazy to cook, so the garlic baguettes came in handy for a meal. I thought I should buy her some juice next time I see her. A few days later, she came by again, worried because her washing machine had stopped working, and she couldn't get through to customer service over the phone. Although it was a bit of a hassle, I went over to her place. Maybe the circuit breaker tripped, I suggested. Oh, I hadn't thought of that, she exclaimed. Sure enough, the laundry room's switch had been flipped off. She was relieved to see the washing machine start working again after flipping the switch back on. As I was leaving, she said, "Wait, I have some golden kiwis I bought from the store. Take some with you," and gave me 5 of them. I tried to refuse, saying, "You don't have to give me anything in return. I'm happy to help without any gifts." But she insisted. After that, we occasionally ran into each other. One day, the boiler broke down and she asked if she could shower at my place because fixing it immediately wasn't an option. I suggested boiling water or going to a nearby sauna, but she said the sauna was closed that day, and she once got burned by spilling a boiling kettle as a child. So she was too scared to handle hot pots. "I'll cook something delicious for you after you shower," I said, and she went into the bathroom. She hummed a tune while washing up and emerged looking rejuvenated. It was the first time I saw her without makeup. Her skin was flawless and her figure, though petite, was remarkably toned. At that moment, I saw her in a new light, and we connected on a deeper level. She joked, "I've tried everything to catch a handsome young man's eye, and nothing worked. But today, my plan succeeded." When I asked about her husband, she said, "Don't worry, he's on a business trip for a few days." She asked if I wanted tortillas, and when I mentioned I also liked broccoli soup, she brought ingredients from her house to cook at mine. She was quick and skilled in the kitchen, and we enjoyed the meal together. We spent every day together until the day before her husband was due back. She offered to iron my shirts, saying, "You don't have much to take care of living alone. Let me do it." But I insisted, "I'm better at ironing. You should just relax and enjoy your visit." Living in an area surrounded by shops and markets, she suggested visiting a massage chair salon run by a friend of hers. We agreed to go in the evening to avoid the morning crowd of elderly visitors. Upon arriving, her friend, seeing me, exclaimed, "Wow, so young and handsome. Emily must have praised you to the skies." I was taken aback and looked at Emily. "Sophia, stop it and let us try the massage chairs," she said. We chose the full course, and Sophia explained that these bed-style massage machines were more popular than traditional massage chairs. She had to squeeze the leg compression massagers onto my legs, joking that whoever ended up with me was lucky, which was embarrassingly flattering. After enduring the playful teasing from the ladies at the salon, I felt refreshed and relaxed from the massage, despite not having exercised separately from work. The next day, I visited the salon again after work without telling Emily, and Sophia seemed quite surprised. I had such a good night's sleep after using the massage chair. "I just had to come back for more," I said. The lady, Sophia, was about to close up shop for the evening, but seeing a handsome young man walk in, she decided she needed to call her husband and tell him she'd be home late. Feeling a bit guilty, I offered to come back another time, but she insisted it was fine and called her husband anyway. I have 2 customers who came in for a trial session, explaining everything and going through. The process will take at least an hour and a half. "Don't wait up for me, just eat dinner on your own," she told him over the phone. The thought that she might be hungry because of me made me feel somewhat bad. When you do this kind of work, you adjust to the customers' schedules. "It's fine if I eat later, so please, enjoy your session," Sophia reassured me. She turned on the heat function of the massage chair, and I ended up falling asleep during the session, entering a dreamlike state. In this state, I felt Sophia looking at me with a smile, which was somewhat unsettling considering my hands and legs were restrained by the massage equipment, and I wasn't covered by a blanket. After the session, she mentioned locking up the store and suggested moving to a sofa massage chair to chat for a bit. I agreed. Once the full session was over, she led me to the sofa massage chair and draped a blanket over me. Sophia's earnest gaze somehow made me feel like I was burning through my youth. A few days later, I ran into Emily, the neighbor lady. "I heard you visited Sophia's place. Why didn't you tell me? You went alone." "Yeah, the massage chairs are pretty good. My place is too small to have one, so I plan to go there occasionally," I replied. Sophia was so happy to have a handsome guest visit her shop. "Let's go together next time, haha," she suggested. I couldn't tell how much Sophia and Emily had shared with each other. Shouldn't secrets be kept among close friends? My mind was so cluttered after meeting Emily that I couldn't even focus on work. I came up with a plan to keep the ladies from spilling too many secrets. I suggested to Emily, "Let's all have dinner and hang out with Sophia." We set a date, and it felt like a bond was forming. We decided to treat each other like sisters. We had steak for dinner and enjoyed a few drinks, which left us feeling quite merry. "Should we all stay together tonight?" I suggested. The ladies loved that idea. It was an entirely new experience for me, but it turned out to be quite extraordinary. We all felt like we had ascended to heaven that night, and the ladies were thoroughly satisfied with the special time we spent together. Occasionally, I meet up with Sophia and Emily separately. Each has her own unique charm, which I really appreciate.
Sophie Laurent stood by the window of her art gallery in Paris, sipping a glass of red wine as she watched the busy streets below. The clink of glasses and quiet murmur of conversations in the background made her feel like a spectator in her own life. At 32, she had achieved everything she'd once dreamt of. Her gallery, La Vie en Couleur, had become a renowned place for contemporary art, attracting critics and buyers from across Europe. But success had a hollow ring to it when she thought about the other part of her life, her marriage. 6 years had passed since she married Marcus Hartmann, a German architect with sharp features and a mind always buzzing with ideas. She could remember their wedding day as if it were yesterday. How handsome he looked in his tailored suit, the way his smile had lit up her world. Back then, they had everything, a passionate romance that transcended the physical and delved into their shared dreams of traveling the world, creating art, and leaving a mark. Yet, as time passed, things began to change. Marcus had thrown himself into his career. His architectural firm in Berlin had taken off, and though they lived apart, Sophie had hoped their love would remain strong. The distance, however, had done more than just create physical space between them. Their conversations had dwindled from intimate late-night calls to routine check-ins, dominated by discussions of work and logistics. Sophie hadn't seen Marcus in nearly 2 months. His last trip to Paris had been brief, and even then he seemed distracted, more interested in his projects than in her. The gallery, which had once been a source of pride for both of them, now felt like a lonely fortress Sophie had to manage on her own. That night, as she stared out of the window, she couldn't help but wonder if she was becoming invisible to her husband. He had once been captivated by her beauty, by her love for art, and by the way she lived life with so much passion. Now he barely seemed to notice her at all. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening behind her. She turned to see her assistant, Elodie, standing there with a polite smile. "Madame Laurent, the guests are arriving for the exhibition. Shall I show them in?" Elodie asked in her soft French accent. "Yes, of course," Sophie said, placing her wine glass on the table. "Thank you, Elodie." As the guests began to filter into the gallery, Sophie put on her professional mask, greeting each one with a warm smile. She moved through the crowd, discussing the latest pieces on display, but her mind kept drifting back to Marcus. What was he doing right now? Was he thinking of her at all? It was during one of these drifting moments that she noticed a man standing by one of the paintings, his gaze fixed on the canvas, as if he were lost in thought. He was tall, with dark hair and sharp features, dressed in a tailored suit that gave him an air of sophistication. There was something about the way he looked at the painting that intrigued Sophie. She walked over to him, her curiosity piqued. "Do you like it?" she asked, her voice smooth and professional. The man turned to her, his eyes meeting hers with a spark of recognition. "Very much," he said in a low melodic voice. "The use of color is captivating. It feels alive, as if the artist captured a moment of raw emotion." Sophie smiled. "That's exactly what I love about it too. The artist, Isabelle Moreau, has a way of making you feel something with every brush stroke." "I'm Luca Moretti," the man said, extending his hand. "Art critic and enthusiast." Sophie shook his hand, her smile widening. "Sophie Laurent, I own the gallery." "Ah, so you're the one responsible for bringing such remarkable works to Paris. I must say, I'm impressed," Luca said, his eyes lingering on hers for a moment longer than necessary. Sophie felt a flutter in her chest. It wasn't often that someone made her feel seen, truly seen. And Luca was doing just that. They continued to talk, their conversation flowing effortlessly from art to travel to their shared love of culture. Luca was charming, witty, and attentive in a way that Marcus hadn't been in years. He listened to her, asked questions, and seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say. As the night wore on, Sophie found herself laughing more than she had in months. She was captivated by Luca's stories of his travels through Italy, his passion for art, and the way he saw the world. He had a certain vibrancy about him that was infectious, and for the first time in a long time, Sophie felt alive. When the exhibition finally ended and the guests began to leave, Luca lingered. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Sophie," he said, his voice soft and sincere. "I hope we can continue our conversation another time." Sophie hesitated for a moment, her mind racing with thoughts of Marcus. But the allure of Luca's attention was too strong to resist. "I'd like that," she said, her heart pounding in her chest. As Luca left the gallery, Sophie stood by the door, watching him disappear into the night. There was a part of her that knew this was dangerous, that this was the beginning of something she couldn't control. But another part of her, the part that had been starved of affection and passion for so long, was desperate for more. Days turned into weeks, and Sophie found herself thinking about Luca more often than she should. Their casual meetings at art exhibitions and gallery events had become a regular occurrence, and each time they met, the connection between them grew stronger. Luca had a way of making Sophie feel like the most important person in the room. He listened to her in a way that Marcus never did, and he had a passion for life that reignited something within her. She found herself drawn to him, not just because of his charm, but because he made her feel alive in a way that she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't long before their meetings turned into something more. One evening, after a particularly successful exhibition, Luca invited Sophie to join him for dinner at a quiet, candle-lit restaurant on the banks of the Seine. The atmosphere was romantic, and the conversation flowed as easily as the wine. As the night wore on, Sophie found herself opening up to Luca in ways she hadn't with anyone before. She told him about her marriage, about how distant Marcus had become, and about the loneliness she felt in her life. Luca listened, his gaze never leaving hers, and for the first time in years, Sophie felt truly understood. "I don't know how it happened," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But somewhere along the way, Marcus and I lost each other. I don't even know if we can find our way back." Luca reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You deserve to be happy, Sophie. You deserve to be with someone who sees you, who appreciates you for who you are." Sophie felt a lump form in her throat. But what if it's too late? What if we've drifted too far apart? Luca's grip on her hand tightened. "It's never too late to find happiness, Sophie. Sometimes you have to make a choice to live for yourself." Sophie's heart raced as she looked into Luca's eyes. There was a part of her that knew this was wrong, that she was on the verge of crossing a line she couldn't come back from. But the temptation was too strong, and the pull of Luca's attention was too powerful to resist. Later that night, as they walked along the Seine, Luca leaned in and kissed her. It was a soft, tentative kiss at first, but as Sophie responded, it deepened into something more passionate. In that moment, all of her doubts and fears melted away, replaced by the thrill of being desired again. But as they parted, and Sophie stood alone on the banks of the river, the weight of what had just happened began to sink in. She had crossed a line, one that could never be uncrossed. Let's continue the story, diving deeper into the emotional and psychological ramifications of Sophie's choices, while maintaining the complexity and tension within the plot. Here's the next part of the story. Scene 3. The Web of Lies. The next morning, Sophie woke up with a knot in her stomach. She sat at the edge of her bed, the memory of Luca's kiss still lingering on her lips. Her heart was heavy, weighed down by guilt and confusion. The line she had crossed felt too far gone now, and yet there was an undeniable pull toward Luca, a man who made her feel alive in ways Marcus hadn't in years. She glanced at her phone, hoping for a message from Marcus, but it was empty. Nothing. His silence, once something she could handle, now felt unbearable. It was as if the distance between them had grown wider overnight. Sophie rose from her bed, walking to the window that overlooked the Parisian streets below. The city was vibrant, alive with its usual energy, but Sophie felt hollow inside. She had made a choice, one that now seemed impossible to undo. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Luca. "Good morning, Sophie. I can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again?" Sophie's heart fluttered, but the guilt was still there, gnawing at her. She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the screen. Every part of her screamed that this was wrong, but the allure of Luca's attention was too strong to resist. "Soon," she typed back, before setting the phone down and turning to her closet. She needed to clear her mind, to get back to her work at the gallery, where at least she could distract herself from the chaos of her emotions. At the gallery, the usual flow of clients and art enthusiasts didn't bring Sophie the comfort it once had. Elodie, her assistant, noticed her unusual distraction. "Madame Laurent," Elodie said gently, approaching her, "is everything all right? You seem off today." Sophie forced a smile. "I'm fine, Elodie, just a little tea." Her heart pounding. "I'm fine, Elodie, just a little tired. It's been a long few weeks." Elodie nodded, but there was concern in her eyes. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." Sophie thanked her and returned to her work, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She couldn't shake the memory of Marcus. She had been married to him for 6 years, and yet here she was, exchanging secret messages with another man. It felt surreal, like she was living someone else's life. Later that day, as she stood in the gallery, examining a new shipment of paintings, her phone buzzed again. Another message from Luca. "Dinner tonight. I'll be thinking of you until then." Sophie's breath caught in her throat. This was it. This was the moment where she had to make a decision. To either stop this before it went too far, or to dive in head first. Consequences be damned. Her finger hovered over the screen, her mind racing. She thought about Marcus, about the life they had built together, the promises they had made. But then she thought about Luca, the way he made her feel, the way he looked at her as if she were the only woman in the world. She typed her response before she could stop herself. Yes. That evening, Sophie found herself standing in front of the mirror, adjusting her dress. She had chosen a simple, elegant black dress that hugged her figure, but as she looked at herself, she couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Was she really doing this? Was she really about to meet Luca again? The thought of Marcus weighed heavily on her mind, but she pushed it aside. This was about her, about what she needed, what she wanted. And right now, she needed to feel alive again. She arrived at the restaurant, her heart pounding in her chest. Luca was already there, waiting for her at a candlelit table near the window. He stood when he saw her, his smile warm and inviting. "Sophie," he said softly, his eyes lighting up as she approached. "You look stunning." Sophie smiled, feeling a rush of warmth at his compliment. "Thank you." They sat down, and as the evening wore on, the conversation flowed effortlessly, just as it had before. Luca was attentive, hanging on her every word, making her feel like the center of the universe. The wine flowed, and with each sip, Sophie felt her inhibitions slipping away. By the time dessert arrived, Sophie found herself leaning closer to Luca, her heart racing with anticipation. She knew where this was headed, and yet she couldn't stop herself. She didn't want to stop herself. After dinner, they walked along the Seine, the lights of Paris reflecting off the water, casting a romantic glow over the city. Luca took her hand, and Sophie felt a shiver run down her spine. This was wrong, she knew that, but it felt so right in the moment. They stopped at a secluded spot along the riverbank, and Luca turned to her, his gaze intense. "I can't stop thinking about you, Sophie," he whispered, his voice low and husky. "I haven't felt this way in a long time." Sophie's breath caught in her throat. She knew she should walk away, but the pull of his words, the intensity of his gaze, was too much. And then he kissed her. It was a soft kiss at first, tentative and unsure, but as Sophie responded, it deepened into something more passionate, more urgent. In that moment, all of her guilt, all of her doubts melted away. There was only Luca and the way he made her feel. They parted, breathless, and Sophie stared at him, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. "I should go," she whispered, her voice shaky. Luca nodded, but there was a look of longing in his eyes. "I understand, but I don't want this to end, Sophie. I don't want us to end." Sophie bit her lip, torn between what she knew was right and what she wanted. "I don't know if I can do this, Luca." He took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "You deserve to be happy, Sophie, and I want to be the one to make you happy." Sophie stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. This was the moment where everything would change. Scene 4. The Price of Betrayal. Days turned into weeks, and Sophie found herself living a double life. By day, she was the successful gallery owner, the loving wife of Marcus Hartmann. But by night, she was Luca Moretti's lover. Their affair was intoxicating, thrilling, and dangerous all at once. Every stolen kiss, every secret meeting, was a reminder of the life Sophie had chosen, one filled with passion, but also with lies. Marcus remained oblivious, consumed by his work. He called occasionally, but their conversations were brief, filled with polite exchanges and talk of his latest projects. Sophie could hear the distance in his voice, but instead of confronting it, she buried herself deeper into her affair with Luca. Luca, for his part, was everything Marcus wasn't. He was attentive, passionate, and fully present in their relationship. With him, Sophie felt alive, desired, and important. But as their affair continued, the guilt began to gnaw at her, growing stronger with each passing day. One evening, after a particularly heated argument with Marcus over the phone, Sophie found herself sitting alone in her apartment, staring at her reflection in the mirror. What had she become? A liar, a cheater. The very thought made her stomach turn. But it wasn't just the guilt that weighed on her. It was the realization that she had fallen out of love with Marcus long before Luca had come into her life. Their marriage had been crumbling for years, held together by memories of a love that no longer existed. And now, it was all falling apart. The weight of Sophie's secret had become unbearable. Every day was a battle between her guilt and her longing for Luca. But even the excitement of their affair had started to sour. What was once thrilling now felt suffocating, like a web of lies tightening around her. One afternoon, as Sophie sat in her gallery office, her phone buzzed. It was Marcus. A rare surprise. He almost never called during the day anymore. She hesitated for a moment, her finger hovering over the screen, before finally answering. "Hey," she said softly. "Sophie." Marcus's voice was sharp and tense, unlike the usual cold distance she had grown accustomed to. "I'm in Paris. Can we talk?" Her heart skipped a beat. Marcus hadn't visited Paris in months, and now, out of the blue, he was here. "Of course," Sophie replied, trying to sound casual. "When?" "Tonight, our apartment. I'll be there by 8. Sophie hung up, her mind racing. Marcus didn't just show up unexpectedly, especially not with this urgency in his voice. Something was wrong, and she could feel it deep in her bones. The afternoon passed in a blur, the usual gallery visitors and tasks feeling insignificant compared to the dread looming over her. By the time 8 o'clock rolled around, Sophie was pacing the apartment, her nerves frayed. She had cleaned the place obsessively, as if scrubbing away the evidence of her betrayal would somehow erase the guilt that plagued her. But nothing could prepare her for the moment when Marcus walked through the door. He looked exhausted, his tall frame slumped with the weight of something unspoken. His sharp blue eyes, once so full of warmth, were now clouded with something darker. Sophie opened her mouth to greet him, but the words stuck in her throat. Marcus didn't waste any time. "Sophie, I know." Her stomach dropped. She could barely breathe. "No, what?" Marcus let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "About Luca. About your affair. Sophie felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under her. Her legs buckled, and she collapsed onto the nearest chair, her head spinning. She began. But the words wouldn't come. What could she say? There was no defense, no excuse. How long has this been going on? Marcus's voice was eerily calm, but there was an edge to it, a simmering anger that frightened her. Sophie's mind raced. She could lie, try to downplay the situation, but it was too late for that. Marcus knew. He had known for who knows how long. 2 months, Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible. It's been 2 months. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath as if trying to steady himself. When he opened them again, his gaze was piercing. Why, Sophie? Why would you do this? Tears welled in Sophie's eyes, blurring her vision. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times. The confrontation she had known was inevitable. But now that it was here, she didn't know how to explain the storm of emotions swirling inside her. I don't know, she choked out. I was lonely, Marcus. You were never here. It felt like you stopped caring about me, about us. She wiped at her eyes, her voice breaking. I just wanted to feel something again. Marcus let out a harsh sigh, running a hand over his face. So this is my fault? You're blaming me for your affair? No, Sophie exclaimed, shaking her head. I'm not blaming you. I know I made a terrible mistake. But Marcus, we haven't been happy for a long time. You know that. Marcus's expression hardened. We could have worked on it, Sophie. We could have talked, gone to counseling. Anything but this. His voice cracked, and for the first time Sophie saw the pain behind his anger. You didn't even give me a chance. Sophie sobbed quietly, her guilt overwhelming. He was right. She hadn't given him a chance. She had taken the easy way out, falling into Luca's arms instead of facing the cracks in her marriage. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice trembling. I'm so sorry. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but firm. I loved you, Sophie. I still do. But I don't think I can forgive this. Sophie felt her heart shatter. She had known this was coming, but hearing the words still cut deeper than she could have imagined. I understand, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I'll move out. I'll leave Paris if you want. Marcus shook his head. You don't have to leave Paris. But this is the end of us. The finality in his words crushed her, and for a moment, she thought she might collapse under the weight of it all. But deep down, she knew he was right. Their marriage had been crumbling long before Luca entered the picture. The affair had just been the breaking point. Marcus stood up, his expression resolute. I'll stay at a hotel tonight. We can talk about the details later. He grabbed his coat and headed for the door. But just before leaving, he turned to look at her one last time. Goodbye, Sophie. And with that, he was gone. Sophie sat there, numb, staring at the door. The silence of the apartment was deafening. And for the first time, she felt the full weight of her actions. She had destroyed her marriage, not just with her affair, but with her refusal to face the problems they had been avoiding for years. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Luca. Thinking of you, can't wait to see you again. Sophie stared at the screen for a long time before deleting the message. Luca was no longer part of her world. He had been an escape, a distraction from the reality of her failing marriage. But now there was nothing left to distract her from. She sat in the dark, the weight of her choices crashing down on her like a wave. The secrets, the lies, the affair, they had all destroyed the one thing she had once held dear. Months passed, and Sophie began to rebuild her life. The divorce was painful, but it also gave her a sense of closure. She and Marcus had both agreed that their marriage had been over long before the affair. They were simply two people who had grown apart, clinging to a relationship that had already unraveled. Sophie continued running her gallery, pouring herself into her work as a way to heal. She had ended things with Luca shortly after the confrontation with Marcus. It hadn't been easy, but she knew it was the right decision. Luca had been a temporary escape, a bandage over a deeper wound. But now, Sophie was ready to face her life without distractions. She spent more time with friends, reconnected with her family, and slowly began to rediscover who she was outside of her failed marriage. It wasn't easy. There were days when the guilt and loneliness overwhelmed her. But there were also moments of clarity, moments when she realized that her mistakes didn't define her. One evening, as Sophie walked along the Seine, she stopped at the same spot where she had kissed Luca months before. The memory of that night no longer held the same allure. Instead, it served as a reminder of the choices she had made and the consequences she had faced. She took a deep breath, letting the cool breeze wash over her. She was learning to forgive herself, learning to move on. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was hers. And for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. Thank you for watching this story of love, loss, and redemption. We hope it resonated with you. If you have any questions about Sophie's journey or your own thoughts about relationships and forgiveness, we'd love to hear them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more engaging stories like this one.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
My name is Jack Taylor, and this is my story. Being married to Mira was a whirlwind, equal parts thrilling, maddening, and heartbreaking. In our 2 years together, I never truly felt married. Sure, I felt the weight of commitment, but Mira? She seemed untethered by it. Her priorities revolved around her figure, her wardrobe, her green card, earning a master's degree, and making money. The one thing missing from her list was me. I was never more than a footnote in her grand plan. Mira is 5 feet 4 inches, with striking blonde hair, a tiny waist, flawless Middle Eastern Eurasian skin, green eyes, and a 36C frame. She radiates a raw sensuality that makes men revert to primal instincts. But for Mira, sex wasn't an expression of intimacy. It was a weapon, a tool for manipulating every man in her orbit. Do I miss her personality? Not at all. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss how she could set the bedroom on fire. She had an unbridled lust, a willingness to try nearly anything, and I was completely hooked. Yet, even in our most intimate moments, I never felt genuine affection or love from her. In hindsight, I can't recall her ever saying, "I love you." It simply wasn't part of her vocabulary or our so-called relationship. Looking back now, there wasn't a real relationship at all. We were just going through the motions, living in a cold, hollow facade. I had been stuck in an ice castle, too blind to see it. It took a hard wake-up call, a figurative slap to the face, to finally pull my head out of the fog. She never wanted slow, passionate lovemaking. She didn't want foreplay. She wanted it hard and raw. The animalistic sex was plentiful. I often longed for the emotional intimacy she denied me. Mira never gave me a hug or a cuddle. She used my body and I used hers. The difference being that I loved her. She never loved me. I was able to take care of her needs, but not a lot of her wants. I went into some serious debt trying. We ate out so much my oven was dusty. I'm a high school teacher. I make a decent living, but I'll never be rich. I did my best. There was no way I could hang with the country club set. It was not enough for her. The greedy bitch. When I met her 4 years ago, she was a nanny. I was immediately impressed with her beauty and intelligence. She was exotic and independent. I later discovered that what I thought was independence was really a manifestation of her self-centered manipulating personality. From the beginning, she was egotistical and selfish. I always saw better in her than actually existed. I felt like a moth that was irresistibly drawn to the flame that would kill him. Don't ask me why. I should have kicked her to the curb after the first week I met her. I guess I needed to see the good in her. Maybe I was thinking with the wrong head. I wish there had been a way for me to keep the lower half of her and get rid of rest of her. So, the obvious question is why I put up with her manipulating, callous, and deceitful ways for so long? Until recently, I never thought of myself as a chicken. Looking back, I guess I was. Somehow, I thought of my patience and tolerance as strength. I promised her father, in Turkey, that I would provide for and protect his daughter. It was important to me that I kept my word. I've always thought that he was a good and honorable man who had no idea who his daughter really is. I was raising twin sons from a previous disaster called a marriage and did not want to be divorced again. I was determined to make my train wreck of a relationship work. When I met Mira, all I wanted was a home and a woman to come home to more than anything. I guess I saw what I wanted to see until I had no choice. I don't want to argue, Jack. It's over between us. You know that, she said, as she dressed to leave our house on a recent Friday night. I need to be with my friends. You mean your boyfriend? I heard most of your conversation on the phone this morning. If he calls my house again, I will throw you and your phone out of the window. Don't get jealous. You know we can't stay together. I am not jealous. You said you wanted to pursue your own life 4 months ago. Why are you still here? You being here does not allow me to get on with my life. My patience with you is finished. I have been tested enough. Don't worry, I'll be gone soon. She looked stunning. Her full red lips, perfume, and sexy black dress left little to the imagination. She was going to meet another man and didn't care that I knew about it. I had always been gentle and kind to her, but that was about to change. His disrespect for me and my sons was intolerable. I knew that I still cared a little about her. I also knew that I had reached my limit. Mira and her boyfriend were going to find out that there would be a price to pay for their treachery and disrespect. My anger grew as I watched her. What has gotten into you? What did I do to deserve this treatment? Did you think I was going to tolerate this crap? Your social life has always been more important than your husband? I have put up with your shit for too long. You've been lying to me for a long time. I know what you've been doing. Tonight, I can't deny it anymore. You treat me and my sons like crap. You really bank on the promise I made to your father that I would protect you from harm. Somehow, my sense of honor and love for you has been turned against me. You have never helped pay a single bill. I supported you as you struggled to get your MBA and through a number of nothing jobs. Now that you've got yourself a big-time job in an investment bank, I'm not good enough for you. Is that it? I could feel my guts boiling. I hate being around your scumsucker sons. I hate it every time I see them. Every time you wrote a child support check, I wanted to puke. Now they are here, and I don't want to be their mother. Besides, you have no sophistication. You're just a simple man who wants a simple life. I need more than you can give, she said, with an indifference and coldness that could not be ignored. She really thought she was somehow superior to me. Bitch, my sons are not scumsuckers, and if you are wise, you will not call them that name again. You have 1 week from today to get your stuff out of my house. If you and your possessions are not gone at that time, I will put all of it in the garbage. After next Friday, you will not be allowed in my house. I will no longer be held captive by the promise that I made to your father. We are finished. I can't stand the sight of you. I was glad that my sons were with my sister for a couple of weeks. They didn't need to be exposed to her another second. I felt ashamed and embarrassed that I ever exposed them to the monster I was looking at. She looked shocked. She was beginning to realize that I had changed. I was not going to take care of her needs anymore. My stomach felt twisted. It felt like I had been gunshot. I hated myself for still feeling anything for her. I wanted to hurt her. At the same time, I grieved for the love that never was, except in my mind. Despite my complete hatred of what she was doing and who she really was, I felt a strange bond with her. It wasn't love. That had been dying slowly for a long time. I felt sorry for her, even though she only deserved my contempt. I truly believed she would end up the victim of her own karma. Her treachery deserved none of my sympathy. I've had enough of your disrespect. And when did you get to be the queen? I'd just like to know, why do you hate them and me so much? You think that you're superior to me, to us. In fact, you're a two-bit hooker who doesn't deserve to breathe the same air as myself or my sons, bitch. Their bitch of a mother dumped them on you, and you dumped them on me. You never have any money. You spend all of your time and income on them. I don't hate you. I don't know how I feel about you. Some part of me still cares about you. But I don't love you, Jack. I need the finer things in life. I deserve that. I never should have married a man with children. I need a man who can give me his full attention, she said, picking up her purse. The only reason I married you was to get a green card and live rent-free until I could arrange my life, and when I needed your dick or anything else, you always said yes. Sorry, dear, she said, mockingly. She had no idea that I was recording the conversation. You've got a lot of nerve calling somebody a 304. You are more of a 304 than my ex ever was. I can't remember you ever trying to be in their lives. You haven't been a wife and definitely not a mother. The days of obliging you are over. From now on, you can take care of yourself. You are as plastic as the fancy cars and restaurants that you love so much. You knew from the beginning my ex left me in a pile of debt. I pay the mortgage, buy the food and everything else. Did you never try to help me? Did you? I said, raising my voice. All you have done since I married you was spending my money. Why did you really marry me? I didn't really expect an answer. I don't have a lot of cash because I have paid your bills. You have never contributed 1 cent to this household. Have you ever been denied anything that you needed since we've been together? You have served your purpose. In a short while, I will have my green card. I have my education and now a great profession. I don't need you anymore. Sorry. I know that's cold. It's the way things are. I might miss your love-making a little, but not much. He is bigger than you." She was smiling. What was that about? She was driving the nail deeper. It took all of my martial arts training not to lash out at her. I wanted to wring her neck and throw her in the street. I decided not to let her bait me. "Did you ever love me?" She looked at me with an evil grin, but didn't answer. I could tell she didn't want to set me off before she was ready to go. The look on her face was my answer. Then, I heard a car horn blow in front of my door. "You are one sick piece of work. You're lucky I haven't thrown you in the street months ago," I said, feeling sad and exhausted. "Don't wait up. I probably won't be back tonight," she said sarcastically. The doorbell rang. The son of a bitch had the nerve to come to my front door. I opened it. "Is Mira here?" he asked with a smirk on his face. "So, you're the guy who can't control his bitch," he said, brushing past me, entering my house. Mira came downstairs and approached the door with a smug look on her face. She stood close to Max. I had found out his name was Max Brown. He was engaged to a rich, divorced woman who had 2 kids. I wondered if Mira knew that. My loving husband just threatened me. He told me I have 1 week to get out. "What do you think about that, Max?" she asked her date. "I think I should kick his butt right now for upsetting you," he said, looking at me. "I would like for you to try that, Max, preferably in front of witnesses. It would be a shame to make your fiancée a widow before she was married. It would be my pleasure to punish you in front of witnesses and teach you some respect," I said calmly, with the smile of predator stalking his kill. He had a confused look on his face. My confidence rattled his confidence. Myra's expression didn't change. She obviously already knew of Max's impending marriage. I figured they had a plan to relieve his fiancée her of her funds, another scam. Those two deserved each other. I decided to screw up their plans. "Never mind him, Max. Let's go. He's had a little martial arts training and thinks he's a tough guy. Don't waste your strength on him. Besides, I want him to sit here and think about you screwing me." "Another time, chicken. Another time," he said, puffing himself up. I started to tell her to stay gone. I realized I needed time to exact my revenge. A few more days were all I needed. I decided not to hurt him at that moment. He was not worth getting arrested for. Apparently, Mira didn't tell him that I am proficient in the Filipino martial art of Kali, the art of combat at close quarters. She chose to denigrate my skills. I wondered why. He was taller than me by about 4 and about 20 pounds heavier. I knew that made him feel overconfident. It was hard to resist the urge to cut him down like a tree. My day would come. He leaned toward me and whispered, "Did she tell you that I screwed her in your bed?" he said, daring me to respond. "Did the bitch make you take a number, or did you stand in line?" He moved toward me. Mira pulled him away. Lucky for him. Sooner or later, his butt was mine. I watched as his Lexus pulled away from the curb. I knew his name, address, telephone number, and place of employment. He was her supervisor at her bank. I had collected a ton of their smutty emails and had pictures of them in various compromising positions in public places. Mira liked the thrill of pretending to be his submissive hooker in public. There's no doubt in my mind, she was setting him up for the kill as she had done to me. I wondered what her father would say when he saw my pictures. I never wanted to hurt her. Her treatment of me and my sons was deliberately cruel. It was past time that I made sure she couldn't inflict any more pain on them or me. The twins were 4 years old. They could never understand why Mira didn't like them. I hated myself for exposing them to her poison as long as I did. They came to me full-time a couple of years ago when their mother dropped them off and disappeared. It was difficult to convince them. It was not their fault. Myra's refusal to spend time around them turned into a good thing. I was able to devote my time in being the best father I could. We were very close and they were the center of my life. My wife and her piece of crap boyfriend had to pay. It was not normal for me to be vindictive. I decided to allow myself to use retribution to assuage my pain. My lawyer would have the divorce papers in a few days. I knew she thought she could abuse me forever. I was glad that I had nothing worth stealing except my house, a modest mutual fund investment, and my eventual pension. I owned the house before I met her. I wanted the satisfaction of serving her before she could serve me. Strangely, I got the feeling she was in no big hurry for a divorce. Being married gave her the freedom to screw around without making any commitments. She was happy with the status quo, at least for now. Even though she would never admit it, she depended on my consistency and stability. She would leave with nothing but regrets. I knew she underestimated my resolve. My plan was in motion. The next step was a visit to the Department of Immigration and Naturalization. I had an appointment with a Ms. Saunders. When I found her cubicle, I was awestruck. She was beautiful. No, more than that, she was stunning. I was expecting an overweight, disgruntled bureaucrat. Mr. Taylor, she said, smiling at me and extending her hand. Please, have a seat. I understand you are here to report a case of immigration fraud. Is that right? She said, smiling. I didn't answer at first. I was lost in her eyes. Her raven black hair and big brown eyes and radiant smile hypnotized me. My body ached from not being with a woman for a long time. If I had to order the perfect woman, it would have been her. I could feel my heart rate increase. She awakened feelings in me that I thought were dead. I struggled to focus. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you are much prettier than I expected. I hope I'm not being too forward, I said, sitting down. She blushed and looked down at her desk modestly. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I haven't heard such a nice compliment in a good while. Let's get down to the business at hand, Mr. Taylor. Why are you here? She said in her most professional voice. I told her the whole story. My soon-to-be ex-wife married me for the purpose of getting a green card. She never loved me and planned on dumping me when her plan was completed. The entire marriage was a sham, a fraud, and I don't want her to get away with it. Do you have any proof of what you were saying? I took a tape recorder out of my pocket and several pictures and emails. I played the tape. My face showed the obvious pain it caused. I don't know if I could use it in court, but it should make my point. I also have pictures of her having sex with her boyfriend in the parking lot of a restaurant and other places. They were not very discreet. She looked at the pictures with a poker face. I think we have enough to proceed, Mr. Taylor. We'll be in touch with you, she said, standing up. We take a very dim view of immigration fraud, especially since 9/11. Thank you for alerting this office. She sounded very professional. Now that we have the business out of the way, would you have dinner with me tonight? I said with pleading eyes. I could sense her ambivalence. I could see her mind appraising the situation and me. By the way, what is your first name? Denise. Denise Saunders. Glad to meet you. I'm Jack. Well, what do you say, Denise? It is not good policy to take work out of the office. I promise not to mention anything about my ex. No business tonight. I have not had a woman's company for a long, long time, especially a lady as lovely as you are. Come on. It's just dinner. Even immigration officials have to eat. I promised to be a perfect gentleman. I waited for her response and hoped for the best. After a few moments of looking at my best smile, she said okay with reservations. Great. What time would you like me to pick you up? If you could meet me in the front of the building at 5:30, we can have an early dinner. I'll call my sitter and tell her I'll be a little late. I can't believe I'm doing this. There is something about you that I trust. I don't know why. You won't be sorry. I promise, I said, trying to control my enthusiasm. I felt like a teenager going on his first date. I had time to go home, get cleaned up, and be back in plenty of time. I realized for the first time in months, I felt good. At dinner, we spoke of many things. She loosened up after a while, and I had the feeling that we had known each other a long time. We were both happy to be in the company of each other. She told about her divorce and her 7-year-old daughter, named Hannah. We talked about her love of cooking and hiking, and I talked of my sons and my love of martial arts and motorcycles. We discovered that we were very different, yet compatible. I found myself wanting to hug her. I kept imaging her body pressed against mine with fiery passion in her eyes. She picked up on my distraction. What are you thinking? You have such a faraway look in your eyes, she said with affection, looking at me intently. I was hoping that you were having as much fun as I am. When I look at you, I get a warm feeling. I see passion and strength in your eyes. From the first moment I saw you, I felt a connection. I feel it too. What is happening here? We just met. I don't even know you. Maybe we just better slow down. That sounds like good advice, very logical. But I'm just going with the flow. If I get too carried away, please just tell me. I don't want to offend you, or have you think I'm some kind of nut. No, actually I'm flattered. I never thought of myself as being that attractive. For the record, I think that every woman I see from this day onward will come in second to you. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had known each other before. Maybe, in a different lifetime, we had been lovers. I can't believe you. Look at my face. Do I look like I'm kidding? She didn't answer. The expression on her face said she understood. How do you feel about what your wife? Soon-to-be ex-wife, I interjected. Jack, how do you feel about her betrayal and manipulation? Denise asked, changing the subject. I hesitated for a moment to collect my thoughts. My face betrayed the pain that I thought I was past. I feel sad, hurt, and angry. My ego has taken a serious beating. I never had a chance to make her happy. She wouldn't let me. I was set up from the beginning. I just can't understand her need to disrespect me. Maybe that hurts more than anything. Could be, there is nothing more to understand than what you see. She is what she is. You're a gentle, kind man. I know that in my heart. You don't deserve how she has treated you. Fortunately, Denise didn't see the other side of me. The part that I kept carefully controlled and reserved for when I needed it. What would you like to see happen to her? She married me to get a green card, among other things. I think the only fitting punishment would be to make sure she gets a one-way ticket back to Istanbul and nothing in the divorce. I said, clenching my fists. Denise reached across the table and took my hands in hers. I could feel her energy and her compassion. It calmed me down. We spoke more of what to do about Mira. How did your ex-husband ever let you go? He didn't. I ran. He wanted me to be his punching bag forever. Unfortunately for him, I had other plans. When he struck Hannah, it was the last straw. I couldn't take it anymore. I left him and never looked back. That was 3 years ago. I'm glad he was such a fool. If he wasn't, we wouldn't be here and I would not be sitting here holding your hand. The thought of anyone hurting Denise enraged me. A small band started playing. They were pretty good. Would you like to dance, lady? They're playing our song. Really, what song is that? Whatever they're playing, I said, pulling her to me, beginning to sway to the music. The feeling of her pressed against me and the scent of her perfume had a strong effect on Mr. Happy. I felt her relax and melt into me. Don't worry about Mira. I'll take care of everything tomorrow, she whispered in my ear as we danced. I realized that I saw more than passion and strength in her eyes. I saw her soul and my future. We kissed with gentle passion and held each other tightly when I took Denise home. I wanted her, and I knew she wanted me. We both knew without speaking, the next time we were together we would make love. I tore myself away from her. Trying to sleep that night, I kept seeing her face and hearing her laugh. I thought, could I be in love already? I wasn't sure. All I knew was that life goes on. Self-pity and regrets are a waste of time, and I had wasted enough time. I was happy. When I returned home, Mira was in the kitchen sitting at the table. I'm glad you're here, I said, sitting across from her. Friday is your last day. I will be home by 6 p.m. Please be here. I have something important to say to you before you go. Will you do that for me? Why don't you tell me now? No, I'm tired. I'm going to bed. I will be glad to get my bed back. I've been in that guest room for too long. I should have made you sleep in the guest room. I should have done a lot of things differently. I went into the den to watch some TV. 20 minutes later, Mira was standing in the doorway wearing the black lingerie I had bought her for our second anniversary. She looked as sexy as ever. I was angry with myself when my body responded. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing she still had that power over me. Jack, you can have me if you want to. It's been so long. Tomorrow, I'm walking out of your life forever. Tonight, you can take me any way you want to for old time's sake. I'm yours, she said in her most sultry voice. I know you still care for me. I see it in your face. Could we forget all of our differences and problems for one night, please? She cooed. I stood up and walked towards her, placing my hands gently on her face. She looked hopeful. I wouldn't screw you with the dog's meat, I said, pushing her face away from me. A pained and confused expression crossed her face. I would remember that look forever. Her last attempt to manipulate and use me had failed. I didn't hate her. What I felt was worse. I felt nothing, numb, empty. I just knew that I needed to get away from her. To feel anything but revulsion would be to invite more heartache. I slept restlessly that night. When the sun rose, my plan for retribution would begin. At 9 a.m., I was in my lawyer's office. Okay, Jack. I'll have your divorce documents today by 3 o'clock. What else? I want to sue Max Brown for alienation of affection or intentional infliction of emotional distress, or anything else you can think of. I want him to pay. He didn't actually cause my marriage to fall apart, but I want him to pay anyway. I also want to sue the bank for not enforcing its morals clause in Max Brown's contract. They knew he was screwing my wife and allowed it to happen. I want to serve these papers personally today at 4 p.m. Can we do this? I hope you're not planning on doing something stupid, said my lawyer. This situation might get really ugly. It is legal for you to serve the papers as long as there is a witness. I hope it does get ugly. I really do. It's better if you don't know what I'm planning, I said with a look of steel determination. I arrived at Max Brown's office at 4 o'clock. A clerk showed me where he was. I saw him leaning over a secretary, placing his face too close to hers. She was trying to put some space between him and her. He looked up in time to see me coming. As I walked towards him, I slipped into the relaxed focus that I call combat mode. Max was about to experience some serious pain. He looked worried, then defiant. "What are you doing here, Taylor?" He was not going to wait long to get his answer. "I have some gifts for you," I said, handing him a copy of my divorce papers, naming him as the correspondent in adultery. He looked annoyed. Everyone in the office was watching. I handed him another document. "This document is a lawsuit charging you with alienation of affection, causing the breakdown of my marriage. And this is a copy of my lawsuit against your bank for allowing this blatant affair to continue in full view and knowledge of your supervisors in violation of the bank's morals clause of your contract." I gave him some of the explicit pictures I had of him and Mira. "Your boss really liked those pictures," I said with a smile. "Is that it?" He was really angry now. I could see the blood rushing to his head. He could barely contain himself. "One more thing," I said, walking away from him and stopping. "Your fiancée should be receiving these papers and pictures right about now by messenger service. I guess she is not too happy with you at the moment. I think she might want her car back. Who is getting screwed now, a-hole?" When he started to rush towards me yelling, "I'll kill you," I knew I had him where I wanted him. I smiled as he ran towards me with clenched fist. My day of retribution was at hand. The next several seconds seemed to move slowly. I waited for his attack and easily sidestepped his charge, sending 2 rapid punches to his liver, followed by a flurry of blows to his torso. Then, I drove my knee into his groin hard enough to lift him off the floor. This was followed by a slap to his ear which ruptured his eardrum. A sweeping backward movement of my leg took his legs away as a simultaneous palm strike broke his nose. He hit the floor with a thud. He wasn't dead, but I had seriously upset his day. Lucky for him, the blow to his nose was intended to break it, not drive the cartilage into his brain. I had considered that option. As the fog of battle lifted, I heard clapping. It seemed to grow louder and louder. The secretary that Max had been harassing was applauding. This was followed by more clapping. I seemed every woman in the office joined in and was happy that Max got his butt kicked. Obviously, no one was shedding any tears for him. I stood there surprised by their support. "Call the police and tell them to bring an ambulance," I said to the nearest secretary. "I think Max over here has a bad headache." She handed me a slip of paper with her phone number on it. She whispered, "Call me." The police questioned me at length. They couldn't understand how so much damage could be done to Max in less than 10 seconds. There were 15 witnesses that said I had acted in self-defense after Max attacked me, threatening to kill me. Reluctantly, they told me to go home and that they would have some questions for me later. I felt good on the drive home. One of my tormentors had been dealt with. Now, there was one to go. When I arrived home, I called Denise and asked her to meet me at home when she got off from work. Mira showed up exactly at 6 p.m. She was irate. "Jack, what the hell have you done? That scene you pulled in my office was humiliating. Everyone in the office is talking about it. I'll lose my job. You almost killed Max. I never knew you could be so heartless and cruel." "Cruel? You're calling me cruel? You screwed that dipshit in my bed and you're calling me cruel? You have one hell of a lot of nerve." "He's damned lucky to still be breathing," I said, trying to control myself. "Who is this bimbo?" she inquired, finally recognizing Denise's presence. "This is no bimbo as you put it. Denise is my very good friend," I said, putting my arm around Denise's waist and kissing her on her cheek. "Denise works for the Department of Immigration and Naturalization." The look on Myra's face was priceless, and she began to understand something was up. "Why is she here?" "I wanted her here to wish you a safe trip." "Trip? I'm not going anywhere." "Oh yes you are," I said, opening the front door. 3 men waited outside, 2 G-man types and a short balding fellow. They came inside and immediately the short guy asked, "Mira Taylor?" "Yes. You've been served. These papers are suing you for divorce for adultery." He turned and left. That left to 2 men. Her jaw dropped. She looked at me, then at them. She looked like she had just been sentenced to death. They showed their ID and badges and said, "We have credible information that your immigration status in this country was obtained fraudulently. Please come with us. We have a few questions we'd like to ask you." As she was being escorted out, she paused at the doorway and turned back to face me. Her green eyes searched mine, desperate, pleading. "Jack, you promised you'd never let anything happen to me," she said, her voice a mix of defiance and desperation. I stood there for a moment, unmoved, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. Then, without a flicker of emotion, I replied, "I lied." I closed the door firmly behind her, sealing off not just the moment but the entire chapter of my life. Forever. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
The sky held a deep darkness, visibility non-existent. Upon receiving the signal, 2 subdued shots were fired, causing 2 guards to collapse. Shots continued for the next 15 minutes. Once everything fell silent, the radio echoed. The building cleared, ready for evacuation. 14 years later, I found myself by the hotel room window, gazing at the sunset, reminiscing about how it all began and reflecting on how I ended up here, sipping my vodka. The liquid burned as I swallowed, mirroring the memories of the past several weeks. Nevertheless, I held on to the hope that all was not lost. You see, 6 weeks ago, I stumbled upon the discovery that my wife of the past 12 years was having an affair. The revelation occurred by accident. But isn't that how most clueless husbands find out? By the way, I'm Logan. Jamie and I met during our junior year in college, dated until graduation. I joined the Marine Corps, and she embarked on a job search. Back then, I loved her, but didn't want her to marry me while I was stationed in who knows where. It seemed unfair to her. So, 5 years later, after completing my Marine service, I returned home and within a few weeks secured a good job with a large company in their sales group. It turned out my boss was also a Marine and had a preference for hiring former military types due to our disciplined work ethic. I excelled in my job, making a name for myself. During this period, I decided to re-enter the dating scene, exploring online sites. To my pleasant surprise, I found my college sweetheart Jamie on one of them. God, she looks good in those pictures. Now, Jamie may not have supermodel looks, but she possesses a body. In college, she pursued modern dance, prioritizing staying in shape. And what a shape she has. Standing at 5 feet 6 inches with legs reminiscent of a dancer, she is not overly muscular but curvy, boasting an amazing figure. Her long, flowing, rich brown hair frames her face, accompanied by those dark brown eyes and a smile that melts my heart every time I see it. She exudes that girl-next-door look, sweet and innocent, with just enough amativeness thrown in for good measure. I signed up as quickly as possible and contacted her immediately. It wasn't until a week later that she responded, questioning where the hell I had been and why I hadn't called or emailed her over the last 5 years. If she was this upset at me for not contacting her during my Marine service, then she must have missed me. This was a very positive sign. Soon, we were dating and essentially picking up where we had left off in college. Within a year, we were married, and a year later, we welcomed our first child, Rebecca. My job was progressing well, even though I found myself traveling more, which was anticipated. 2 years later, our second daughter, Amy, came into the picture. Since then, I've been promoted, and we now reside in a lovely house in a good neighborhood with excellent schools. While I still travel quite a bit, sometimes for 2 weeks each month, it's a necessity for my job. It wasn't until a few years later that Jamie began questioning when I would reduce my travel. She missed my presence and felt safer when I was home. I explained that it was a necessary part of my job, assuring her that it wouldn't be much longer before I would be promoted to the next level, reducing my travel significantly and allowing me to be home more often. She reluctantly accepted this, but wasn't thrilled to see me go on my next trip. Looking back, I should have realized there was trouble brewing, but I fully loved and trusted my wife, making me blind to the initial signs of a problem. The first clue was our arguments over trivial matters. Upon my return home, she would blame me for things unrelated to me. If you were home more, this wouldn't happen, or we need you here, not gallivanting all over the country. She had a valid point, though it took me a while to realize it. The second clue surfaced when I found some of her new lingerie in the laundry. While searching for a shirt, I came across silk underwear and a matching silk top. My wife typically has simple tastes, opting for a t-shirt and shorts or sweatpants for bedtime. The only time I'd bought her something from Victoria's Secret, she wore it just once and never again. However, the lingerie I found was unfamiliar, and I assumed she bought it for herself. The third clue was the decline in our bed activity. Our once passionate and romantic encounters dwindled, with her offering various excuses. Exhausted myself, it didn't initially seem problematic, and I believed things would return to normal once my travel reduced. I refrained from pushing her, aware that pressing the issue would worsen an already challenging situation. The final blow was devastating when first revealed, and I was hesitant to accept it. A mutual friend saw Jamie with someone at a farmer's market 40 miles away from our home. Initially thinking it was me, he observed them holding hands, laughing, touching, and kissing. When he approached, he realized it wasn't me. Sensing something amiss, he discreetly walked away, following them for a while until they drove off in a car. I still remember that call. My cell buzzed as I was leaving a meeting. Frank called me and informed me that he had something important to discuss. I told him I was in between meetings and couldn't talk, suggesting we could talk later. Frank agreed and asked me to call him at the earliest opportunity, expressing some concern in his voice. I assured him that I would and asked if the matter was urgent, to which he replied that it could wait. I hung up, not dwelling on the call, assuming Frank would have informed me if it were urgent. Later that evening, I returned Frank's call. I inquired about the reason for his call and what was so important. Frank hesitated before revealing that he had seen my wife out with another man earlier that day. I asked if she was with a friend, feeling a sense of nervousness. Frank struggled to convey the difficult news, stating that they appeared to be a couple, holding hands, laughing, and kissing. He apologized for being the bearer of such news and suggested that my wife might be having an affair. Those words hit me so hard that I was left feeling numb. What made him think that? We were happily married, and she had no reason to. I couldn't complete the thought. Clues I had noticed earlier suddenly made sense, yet I resisted believing it. Frank brought me back, expressing that he knew it was hard, but I needed to be aware. He suggested there might still be hope to save my marriage and offered his support, telling me to let him know if I needed anything. I acknowledged and thanked him before hanging up, sitting on the bed and grappling with the reality or potential cruel joke. As I pondered, anger intensified at the thought of my wife cheating. During the flight home, I began to cool down and think more clearly about what needed to be done. Without solid evidence, I didn't know where to start. Upon landing, my first call was to Frank, seeking details about the man she was with. Protecting my daughters from our issues was crucial. I wanted to salvage our marriage. Frank advised me not to do anything I would regret and shared that he had a friend who went through a similar situation. He suggested I talk to him for insight on handling the situation, emphasizing the importance of avoiding trouble or making things worse. Frank's advice resonated, and I realized I needed guidance from someone who had faced a similar situation. Right now, the best course of action is to head home and act like everything is normal. If she suspects you're onto something, it'll be tougher to gather evidence against her. I hope I'm mistaken, but I'm certain about what I witnessed that day. Frank was correct. Upon reaching home, I managed to compose myself enough to behave normally around Jamie and the girls. It wasn't a walk in the park, but I somehow pulled it off. In the following days, I searched the house for any clues of her affair, but nothing stood out. Yet, a nagging feeling persisted that I might be overlooking something. Frank called, suggesting I talk to his friend. I agreed to meet them at a bar across town the next day after work, keeping it from Jamie by mentioning late meetings. In the dive bar, I found Frank and his friend Mark in a back booth nursing beers. Frank looked up as I sat down. Mark greeted me as the friend Frank had mentioned. We exchanged greetings, though neither seemed thrilled to be there. Mark spoke, having been briefed by Frank on my situation. He empathized with my feelings but warned against making the same mistakes he did, sharing his painful experience of revenge. It led to a 5-year prison term and losing everything in the divorce and lawsuit against his wife and her boss. He cautioned me against doing anything foolish, his gaze intense. I simply nodded. Curious about alternative approaches, I inquired about what he would have done differently. Mark admitted he'd still go after the boss, but in a subtler manner to catch him off guard. He expressed deep contempt for the man who stole his wife. As for his wife, knowing what he knows now, he'd have opted for a divorce. Our conversation then delved into the do's and don'ts of my situation. The initial step was to secure damning evidence of my wife's infidelity to prevent any denial when confronting her. The second step involved consulting a divorce lawyer to understand how to protect assets and determine my rights in this situation. The third was to keep a substantial amount of cash on hand in case she discovered my actions and froze accounts and credit cards. Lastly, securing a small apartment or alternative living arrangements was crucial in case I decided to leave, ensuring I had a place to stay. While these suggestions were sound, I initially believed I could resolve the issue through conversation. However, as soon as I mentioned this, Mark pounded his fist on the table. Mark emphasized the importance of not doing anything stupid, pointing out that her new boyfriend might be filling her head with tales. He suggested that before approaching my wife, I needed to understand what she had been told and what she believed. Mark drew parallels to my military background as a Marine, highlighting the significance of good intel in battle. He stressed the need for a plan of attack and a strategy for when things go sideways, emphasizing the importance of knowing which way is forward. His question about my military service caught me off guard, and I confirmed that I was a Marine. I questioned the relevance, and Mark continued to stress the importance of having a plan and strategy, drawing connections to my current situation. I sighed, struggling to accept the possibility of my seemingly happy marriage coming to this. Mark apologized quietly, and we sat in silence until Frank broke it, asking about my plan and how I wanted to handle the situation. Realizing the necessity, I expressed my desire to salvage my marriage if possible. But more than anything, I wanted the other man to suffer without risking my own freedom. I made it clear that obtaining proof and intel on my adversary was a priority. Mark smiled at my last comment. He advised against hiring a private investigator, citing his own costly and unproductive experience. With access to her bank, credit card accounts, and phone records, he suggested checking for unusual purchases or calls. Additionally, exploring the possibility of a second cell phone and setting up hidden video cameras around the house for both visual and audio recording. Despite the discomfort, I agreed, determined to make him pay. Our conversation continued for another hour, during which I mentally noted the suggestions offered. Mark's advice emphasized the importance of not discussing the situation at work until I identified my wife's potential lover, considering the risk that someone familiar with my schedule might catch on. He also mentioned he would have approached his wife's lover more subtly, sparking my determination to devise a plan to outsmart this person. However, I needed more information and assistance. The next workday, I scrutinized my upcoming travel plans for the next month, discovering a 2-day trip. Concerned about someone at work knowing my schedule, I discreetly spoke with my boss, suggesting I might extend the client visit to a whole week. He approved the idea without hesitation. The subsequent step involved creating the illusion of being away while secretly returning. Using a prepaid debit card with cash, I purchased a return ticket on another airline. Online, I acquired several spy cameras and a regular camera with a powerful zoom and good low-light capabilities. This constituted the first part of my plan to uncover the identity of this person. The second part aimed to capture them in the act on video, eliminating any doubt of her infidelity. My day was dedicated to meticulous plotting and planning, a skill at which I excel. However, the crucial missing piece of information was the identity of the man involved. Until that was resolved, I couldn't trust anyone, not even my best friend and boss, Hal. Recognizing it would take time to unveil this person's name, I remained determined. By week's end, all the ordered items had been delivered to Frank's home. Now, I just needed the opportunity to discreetly install the spy cameras around my house. With Jamie's Saturday shopping routine with her girls and mother, the house would be empty. After several hours, all the cameras were in place and tested. I could even monitor them in real time from my tablet or laptop over the internet and observe what was happening. With the cameras installed, I proceeded to search the house for clues. Initially, I checked the credit card bills for any unusual charges, followed by an inspection of her closets to see if she had purchased any new, more revealing or shapely clothes. While my search didn't yield concrete evidence, I came across a few newer items, including a very short red dress I had never seen her wear before. The idea of her wearing it for anyone but me troubled me. Despite the lack of definitive proof, the red dress represented a departure from her usual attire, driving me to the point of needing time to think. I opted for a 5-mile jog in my running shorts and shoes, a long run that typically calmed my mind and provided clarity upon my return. As I arrived home, spotting Jamie's car in the driveway, I knew my daughters, whom I affectionately called my angels, were home. Their voices and laughter as I walked in never failed to bring a smile to my face. Calling out to Jamie, I was joyfully greeted by my girls running from the family room to share their day. Jamie emerged from the kitchen, inquiring about my run and kissing me on the cheek before shooing the girls away. After dinner preparations consisting of pork chops, I enjoyed a shower and our evening meal, followed by putting our girls to bed. In the family room, we watched TV, though my preoccupation with thoughts of Jamie's actions during my trips rendered me oblivious to the screen. Feeling overwhelmed, I announced an early bedtime, retreating to our bedroom. In the bedroom, noticing Jamie's purse on the hope chest, I took a chance and searched for clues. To my dismay, I discovered a cheap cell phone previously unknown to me. Turning it on, I recorded the number and reviewed the call log, finding only one unfamiliar number, which I also noted before powering off the phone. This newfound evidence compelled me to finally accept the fact that she was having an affair. Heartbroken and consumed with a desire for revenge, I remembered Mark's advice not to act impulsively and resolved to be patient. Quickly changing, I went to bed, pretending to be asleep when Jamie eventually joined me, avoiding conversation to prevent unintentional revelations. The next few days were challenging, attempting to maintain a semblance of normalcy after uncovering damning proof. As the morning of another business trip approached, I went through my usual routine, packing my bags into the car. Just before heading out, I casually asked Jamie if she had anything special planned during my absence, receiving a strange look as she mentioned the usual routine. Racing through possible explanations in my mind, I bid a quick goodbye and drove to the airport, wondering if the cameras in our house would capture her with the person involved. Despite hoping for her decency to refrain from bringing him into our bed, I became increasingly certain that, before all this, she would never have cheated on me. In the following days, concluding my work with the particular client in record time, I packed up, preparing to return home. That evening, I monitored the video feeds from the cameras but found nothing unusual. Consequently, I opted to review earlier recordings. The system initiated recording when someone entered the camera-equipped room, storing all footage centrally, accessible remotely. As I fast-forwarded through that day's recordings, I discovered a moment when Jamie was on her secret cell phone. I stopped and reversed the video to observe her answering the phone, then played it at normal speed. The audio quality was poor, but I heard enough. She was speaking to someone, referring to them as baby. They discussed my absence for the week and the logistics of meeting discreetly at a motel. Despite my urge to hear the rest, she laughed and turned her back to the camera, making it impossible for me to catch the entire conversation. When she turned back, she continued, instructing the person to park down the street at a coffee shop a few blocks away. "Okay, baby, I can't wait. I'll see you tomorrow night." I couldn't believe what I just heard. He was going to be in my house and our bed. Thoughts of disposing of his body crossed my mind, but Mark's warning echoed, urging me not to do anything rash. Suppressing my anger, I resolved to wait for the right moment, though the strain was becoming unbearable. My wife, the love of my life, and the mother of our 2 children, was betraying me. Why was she doing this? What had driven her into the arms of another man? The flight back home was too quick. I wasn't ready for what awaited me. So I checked into a hotel, contemplating my next move. I knew tonight was the night he was coming to my house, and I wanted to see him with my own eyes. Was he someone I knew, or someone from work? That much I needed to know to help me decide how to proceed. With no idea of what time he'd arrive, I knew he was going to park at the coffee shop down the street, so I waited there, even though I had no idea what he looked like. To be safe, I rented a car at the airport, finding a spot with a good view of the parking lot. I brought my camera, checking the zoom quality. I could be at least 100 yards away and get a close-up view of his face and license plate. Around 9 p.m., a silver BMW M3 pulled into the parking lot. I began taking pictures, and thankfully the lighting was good, giving me a clear view of his face. It was no one I recognized. He parked on the other side of the lot, away from the coffee shop, then started walking towards my house. I took a deep breath to control my rage while sitting there. I accessed the Wi-Fi from the coffee shop, viewing the cameras in my house. After several minutes, I saw him enter and passionately kiss my wife. Suppressing my fury, I listened to their conversation. He expressed his thoughts about her all day, and they discussed having the house to themselves until the next morning, since she had sent the kids over to her parents for the night, and I wouldn't be back until Friday. How considerate that she sent the kids away. I observed as he started undressing my wife right in our living room. She reciprocated, and in just a few short minutes, They were undressed, with their hands all over each other. She suggested taking it up to the bedroom, and they both ran out of sight of the camera towards the stairs. As I listened to their laughter, leaving their clothes spread around the floor, I realized I needed to act. Lucky for me, I got out of my car and walked quickly down to my house. The front door was left unlocked as they hurried upstairs, making things easier for me. I went straight for his pants, discovering his wallet with all the needed information and a little extra. With his wallet in hand, I headed to my home office on the first floor, opposite our bedroom, minimizing the risk of being hurt. Switching on my computer and the printer scanner, I waited for them to power up. Once ready, I began scanning items from Stephen Bannister's wallet, copying his driver's license and other details. After returning the wallet, I took pictures of their scattered clothes and started recording what I was witnessing with the camera's video feature, quietly ascending the stairs. As I reached the top, faint sounds of their lovemaking reached me, turning my stomach. The bedroom door was wide open, and they believed they had the house to themselves. Slowly, I made my way toward the bedroom. With their voices getting louder, I found myself in the doorway, observing Steve on his back, undressed, with my wife on top in the classic 69 position, pleasing each other. They were so engrossed that I managed a few steps into the room unnoticed. Aware that the hidden cameras didn't offer the best definition, I desired high-definition footage. I recorded several minutes before resisting the urge to grab a baseball bat and attack him. Mark's wise words echoed in my mind, "Don't do anything stupid." So I backed out slowly and left the house. Driving back to the hotel, my mind was a mess, and the hate I felt was at an all-time high. I couldn't remember being this mad, and it was starting to scare me. I called Frank, sharing what I had done and the information obtained. Frank acknowledged my actions, but expressed concern about the risk of being in the house again. He apologized for the situation and offered any help he could provide. I thanked him and mentioned my need to talk with someone and my intention to ask Mark for a favor. Frank agreed to arrange a meeting with Mark over the weekend, as Mark had expressed a willingness to help. After the conversation with Frank, I attempted to sleep without success. I decided to clear my mind and work off the rage with my usual morning run. However, it did little to ease my emotions. Following the run, I took a shower and then a long nap to cope with the lack of sleep from the previous night. Returning the rental car to the airport, I picked up my own car and headed straight to the office to check in and talk with Hal. I needed to reduce my work-related travel, and upon entering Hal's office, I closed the door and informed him about my situation. I mentioned my wife's desire for me to be home more and expressed the need for changes in my travel schedule. I looked at Hal, awaiting his response. Hal informed me that my promotion had been approved and I wouldn't have to travel as frequently anymore. It was a welcomed relief, although I couldn't fully grasp it at the moment. My mind was consumed by the knowledge of my wife's affair. Hal noticed my distraction and expressed concern about my recent behavior. I felt compelled to confide in him about what I had discovered. I told him about catching my wife with her lover and recording them together. Hal reacted with shock and sympathy, offering his support. I explained that I needed to be home more to salvage my marriage, and I asked him to keep the situation confidential, fearing someone in the office might be involved in leaking information about my schedule. Hal agreed to cover for me if I needed time off to gather evidence against my wife. I expressed my desire to confront her with undeniable proof to either salvage the marriage or protect myself in a divorce. Hal nodded in agreement, promising his assistance and discretion. After thanking Hal, I left his office feeling a bit relieved that things were falling into place, even though deep down, I knew my marriage was beyond repair. I went home that night and tried my best to act normal. My girls attacked me as I walked through the door, and I had to keep from crying, thinking how they would be affected if a divorce were to happen. I didn't like the idea of having to get permission to visit my own children. I have to get the custody of my kids. On Saturday, while my wife and kids were out shopping, I met with Mark and Frank at a diner. I updated them on the progress I'd made in gathering information. Mark remarked on my courage and expressed surprise that I hadn't taken more drastic action. He then asked how he could assist me, mentioning Frank's mention of my time spent in prison. Both Frank and Mark regarded me with curiosity. For the next hour, I explained my plan and outlined what I hoped to achieve with Mark's connections. When I finished, Mark smiled and expressed admiration for the plan. He mentioned knowing someone who could potentially assist me and suggested they might be able to recommend others, though he cautioned that they would likely expect payment. Mark agreed to make some calls to his contacts. I handed him my cell number and asked him to contact me once he had spoken with his friends so we could arrange a meeting to finalize the details. After discussing a few more ideas, I planned to implement them as soon as possible. I realized I needed to make some additional online purchases to prepare for the next phase of my plan. The rest of the weekend went the way most weekends go, with one noticeable difference. Sunday night. My wife and I usually make love that night. This time she wasn't feeling well. It wasn't the first time this happened, so it was not surprising. But it had been over a month since the last time we were close. My next trip was coming up, and I asked Hal for the following week off. But if anyone called the office, they were to be told I was on a normal business trip. He had no problem with that and wished me luck. So now I had to let my wife know my next trip was going to be longer. She was not happy, but that was to be expected. I reassured my wife that my frequent traveling would soon come to an end, and that I would be home more often. Trying to lighten the mood, I joked that I would be around so much she'd get tired of me. However, she didn't respond with a smile. Instead, she sighed and told me to call her when I arrived at my destination. Her demeanor was distant, and I couldn't shake the feeling that our marriage was coming to an end. I rushed out the door before I said something I'd regret and drove to the airport again. The meetings with these clients went very well, and a deal was reached early, so I was able to fly back a day sooner. I kept checking the cameras during the week, but he didn't reappear at my house. But I did see her on that secret cell phone of hers, so I listened to her conversation, and I knew this was the opportunity one was looking for, even though it smacked me to hear what she was planning on doing. I went to the office and found the items that I had ordered waiting for me. Knowing my wife's normal routine, I could easily set up one of these items that I got with little chance of being caught. She went to the gym 4 times a week, and I knew where and when. So I had her spare car keys and was able to place the item where she wouldn't find it. Next, I went to Steven's condo to see if he was there. I saw his car parked in the carport, so I assumed he was home. I brought my camera and was checking if I could see him inside. I got very lucky as I saw him through his sliding doors and that he wasn't alone. He was with another woman, and they seemed to be romantically connected as they were kissing and touching each other as a loving couple. This was too good to be true, as I took a video of their affection for each other. When I saw them leaving together, I followed at a safe distance. They went for lunch, and this gave me a chance to place the other item on his car. This was a little more difficult and dangerous if someone saw me, but I was able to do it without being caught. Now all I needed to do was wait. That was the hardest thing for me to do. I received a call from Mark, who informed me that he had a friend who could assist with my plan. We decided to meet in my hotel room to avoid being seen together in public, considering the nature of the activities we were planning. When they arrived, Mark introduced me to Joe, a computer hacker who could help with our scheme. Over the next hour, I recounted the details of my wife's affair and expressed my desire for revenge against her lover. I showed them copies of the contents of the man's wallet that I had obtained. Joe raised concerns about the legality of our plan and demanded to know what was in it for him. After considering for a moment, I offered Joe $5,000 in cash. He agreed to the terms, but insisted on receiving half of the payment up front and the remainder upon completion of the job. We discussed the need to gain access to the man's condo to access his computer and gather additional evidence against my wife. With the intel I had on Steven, Joe used my laptop to review his recent purchases. What stood out were the 2 airline tickets to Las Vegas and a hotel reservation for 5 nights. This signaled our decision to break into his condo, prompting Joe to ask if he knew whether there was an alarm system. I admitted uncertainty, so Joe agreed to investigate and get back to me. If an alarm system was present, he insisted on an increased payment for facilitating our entry. I agreed to pay him more, contingent on justification. It appeared my wife was planning a final trip with this individual. I checked my tablet to confirm the functionality of the tracking devices I placed in their cars, accessible via my tablet or smartphone, to monitor their locations. Additionally, I examined home video cameras, confirming she had packed a small carry-on bag for the trip. The day arrived, and I monitored their progress from my hotel room. I called Joe and he agreed to meet later that afternoon. While he hadn't identified any visible alarm systems, he emphasized the need for caution. We met a few blocks from Stephen's condo and discussed the plan for gaining entry. Joe, drawing on his prison experience, possessed the skill of lockpicking. It was just after sunset, and the growing darkness would help maintain discretion. Joe, with his laptop in a messenger bag and my camera at the front door of Stephen's condo, immediately knelt down and worked on the locks for almost a minute. Soon, the door was open, and we entered, first checking for any signs of an alarm system. Satisfied that none existed, we proceeded to locate Stephen's computer. Fortunately, it was openly accessible, allowing Joe to carry out his tasks. I interrupted, saying, "Wait," as I slowly recorded a video of the room's layout. "I want to ensure we leave everything as we found it." Joe nodded in agreement, acknowledging the importance of leaving no traces behind. He resumed his work as I explored for potential incriminating evidence. Browsing through his mail, including bank statements and credit card bills, I ventured into his bedroom, capturing video footage. The remarkable cleanliness and high-end furniture suggested affluence, leaving me still uncertain about his profession. Joe's exclamation of "pay dirt" brought me back to the living room. He successfully accessed Stephen's online bill payments, discovering checks and extra credit cards. I was pleased, having brought a card reader to record information from the magnetic strip. Joe proposed making copies for online purchases, potentially maxing out his cards in a few hours. Joe grinned and inquired if it was possible to empty out the man's bank account. I confirmed that it could be done, intending to carry out the transaction from the man's computer to make it seem legitimate. Joe mentioned the possibility of the bank calling to verify the transaction, but assured me that no password was necessary, as I had already copied the man's social security number from his wallet. I chuckled at the man's carelessness and gave Joe the go-ahead to proceed. Expressing my desire to inflict maximum damage on the man, I suggested emptying his bank account immediately and sabotaging his credit cards on the day of his return from Las Vegas. Joe enthusiastically agreed, referring to it as a fitting homecoming gift. He emphasized the importance of covering our tracks to avoid any repercussions. I reassured him that I was taking precautions to avoid detection, pointing out the latex gloves we were wearing as evidence of our caution. I went back to search through his bedroom and didn't find much until I looked in the back of his closet. I found a shoebox with several recordable DVR discs. They were labeled with the names of women. As I pulled out the box, I dumped it on his bed and started to sort through them. I didn't recognize any of the names until I saw Jamie's. That idiot had recorded the two of them together. But why? Joe called me over to the other room to show me something he had found. He explained that the man we were targeting was involved in blackmail, possessing numerous videos of women with Stephen. These videos showed the women's faces clearly, but Stephen's face wasn't always visible due to the camera angles. Some emails indicated that the women were being extorted for money, with threats of using the videos against them in court. Joe speculated that Stephen preyed on married women with children, exploiting their vulnerabilities for his gain. Seeking retaliation, I asked Joe if Stephen kept all the videos on his hard drive. Joe replied that he wasn't certain, but suggested that the DVDs found in the closet might contain the only copies. I decided to gather the DVDs and search for a backup drive, but couldn't find one. Returning to Joe, I learned that he had located the backup drive. After instructing Joe to do a full backup and wipe the laptop's drive, I explained our plan to bankrupt Stephen by ruining his blackmail scheme. I also expressed my desire to inform the women involved that they were no longer under threat. I asked Joe to print out all relevant emails so I could set up an email account to communicate with them. He offered to set up the account from Stephen's computer, and I agreed to the idea. After wrapping things up, I did one last sweep of the place before we locked up and departed swiftly. Back at the cars, I gave Joe an envelope containing the remainder of his payment, expressing my gratitude for his assistance. We shook hands, and he assured me he'd be ready to carry out the next phase of our plan when needed. With that, he drove off, and I returned to my hotel to continue implementing my scheme. I called my in-laws to check on my children. My father-in-law answered, and I greeted him cheerfully, inquiring about the kids and expressing my hope that they weren't causing any trouble. He reassured me that the children were behaving well and mentioned Jamie's weekend trip with her friends. I feigned ignorance and said I hadn't spoken with her yet, emphasizing that I wanted to ensure the kids were settled before contacting her. After our conversation, it was evident that Jamie's father had no knowledge of her affair in Las Vegas. It further solidified my disdain for her actions. My next call was to the house, which I knew she wouldn't be there, so I left a message. Then I waited an hour, and when she didn't call me back, I called her cell again. She didn't pick up, so I left a message saying I was worried that I had called the house and you didn't answer or called me back, and now you don't answer your cell. Please call me just so I know you're okay. I also added that if I didn't hear from her within the hour, I was going to call her parents. 15 minutes later, I received a surprise call from Jamie. She asked if everything was all right, mentioning that she had tried calling the house but received no answer. I assured her that everything was fine, explaining that I had taken the girls to my parents' house after spending time with friends. Jamie's response sounded somewhat tense. I suggested we have a night out together once I returned home in a week, but her response seemed uncertain. Feeling suspicious, I pressed Jamie, teasing her and attempting to make her nervous. She claimed to be tired and hinted at wanting to end the conversation. Respecting her wishes, I bid her good night and expressed my love before ending the call. Despite my efforts to remain calm, anger began to resurface within me. I didn't sleep well, and so I was up early doing my morning run. I got back to my hotel room and took a nice long shower. Afterward, I called the office and checked if anything needed my attention, but all seemed to be going smoothly there. Then I got the call. Every parent fears Rebecca was injured at school and had to be taken to the hospital. At that moment, nothing mattered to me more than the safety of my child. The school called my house first. When no one answered, they tried to call me at work, which in turn, someone from my office called me. I called the school back, and they informed me she had broken her arm and was at the emergency room being treated. I rushed out the door and went straight to the hospital. Once there, I called Jamie's cell, and when I got her voicemail, screamed into the phone that if she didn't call me within the next 15 minutes, the next call I make is to a divorce lawyer. It was an hour later that my cell rang. I saw it was from Jamie. I rejected the call and sat with my daughter as the doctor set her arm in a cast. She was crying, saying she wanted mommy. I wanted to comfort her, but I didn't know what to say. It took some time, but she finally settled down, and I took her to her grandparents. My phone rang again, and again I rejected. When I had calmed down, I made a call to a good divorce lawyer and set up an appointment for the following day. Then Jamie called again. I took this call. She greeted me sarcastically, commenting on my supposed luck at the blackjack tables and informing me that she had contacted a divorce lawyer. Through tears, she threatened to use the videos she had of me and Stephen together as evidence to gain full custody of our children. I reminded her of her absence when our child was in the hospital, crying for her mother while she was with her lover in Las Vegas. Attempting to reassure her, I suggested that she could start a new life with Stephen and potentially have more children. She insisted that it was me she loved and wanted. Feeling conflicted, I ended the call, unable to bear the emotional turmoil. I took Rebecca and Amy home and helped them pack their bags with some clothes and brought them to my hotel and got them their own room next to mine. Then I called Jamie's father and told him what happened at school and that for the time being, we won't be living at home until some things can be resolved. My father-in-law called and asked about the situation between Jamie and me. I explained that we were having some problems, but suggested he speak with Jamie for more details. He informed me that he would be taking care of the girls for the time being until he was sure of their well-being and safety. Although he didn't fully understand, he wished us the best and hoped we could resolve our issues. I then contacted my lawyer and instructed him to proceed with serving my wife. Next, I called Mark and instructed him to wreak havoc on Stephen by maxing out his credit cards, emptying his bank accounts, and damaging his credit. Later that night, Jamie called me in distress. Initially hesitant to answer, I eventually did after receiving a text from her. She tearfully explained that Stephen was blackmailing her, threatening to share videos of them from Vegas with others. I responded coldly, suggesting that she had brought this upon herself by engaging in the affair. I hung up, knowing that Jamie needed to face the consequences of her actions. She had chosen to leave her home and marriage for her own pleasure, and now she would have to face the repercussions. After deciding to end things with Jamie, I needed to address her lover, Stephen. I called Mark and informed him that I had contacted my lawyer to have Jamie served with divorce papers, which would take a few days. Meanwhile, I wanted to move my money offshore, ensuring that only my funds were protected. Mark questioned my decision, but I assured him that I was done with Jamie and was determined to give her what she deserved. Mark mentioned a change in plans and suggested meeting at 5. We convened at a dive bar and engaged in a lengthy conversation that lasted almost 2 hours. Before parting ways, we shook hands and I handed him a substantial envelope. For the next 3 days, Jamie kept calling, and I kept ignoring. I wanted her to suffer. Friday evening, I got the call I was eagerly waiting for. It was a video call. I answered on the other end. There was a man tied to a chair and all bloodied. A voice in the background informed Stephen that his friend had a message for him. Stephen, looking at the screen, was addressed by someone who mentioned his recent trip to Tijuana and the exhaustion that must come with it. The speaker hinted at Stephen's financial troubles and suggested that his current situation would help him hide from the bank. The speaker continued, mentioning someone named Santiago and his special stew, hinting at a sinister implication. They explained that they could have pursued legal action against Stephen for alienation of affection, but opted not to waste their time. The message concluded with a farewell to Stephen, indicating that someone named Mr. Lopez was now involved. I saw Stephen for the last time that day. In his eyes, I saw fear. That is what I call a good investment. Stephen was still alive when he was lowered into the giant blue drum filled with Santiago's special mix. No one ever heard from him again. No one even asked about him. 7 months later, I was a free man. I got the custody of my daughters. I get to keep the house till both my daughters are 19, and then we can sell and split the difference. There was no alimony or child support. I wanted nothing to do with Jamie, but she has visitation rights, and I usually drop the daughters at her place and drive away. A year later, I started dating Lisa. She was previously Amy's schoolteacher, and it seems that Amy likes her company more than her mother. I have not decided on getting married, and I'm taking this slowly. Tyson Summers finalized the last set of documents provided by Jason, crucial for Jason's management of a specific portfolio, among the largest under Ty's responsibility. This portfolio included the holdings of Wilson Graves, a billionaire investor and entrepreneur affectionately called Willie Graves. Willie thrived on using his wealth for hostile takeovers, acquiring stocks to gain control. Upon success, Willie's strategy involved rapid divestment to enhance his investment's value and involve other trusting individuals. Damn those who got hurt. Serving as Willie's lawyer and legal adversary, Ty successfully maintained Wilson's honesty and kept him out of trouble with the SEC and other federal regulators scrutinizing individuals like Graves. This allowed Willie to amass more wealth, benefiting Summers, Reinhardt, and Haynes Inken. Jason also made strides in managing portfolios for his other clients, aiming to gain full control within the remaining 2 weeks. This would conclude the 3-month process of transferring all of Ty's clients, excluding his special clients. Only Jason, Stacy, Reinhardt, and Clayton Haynes were privy to Ty's impending retirement. Ty reminded himself once more that it was time to let go and prioritize personal time. As one of the founding fathers of the firm, along with Stacy and Clay, they transformed it from a small storefront law firm into one of Columbus, Ohio's largest and most influential. However, this success took a toll on Ty's personal life, impacting both his marriage to Bridget and their family. Celebrating their 20th wedding anniversary last month, Ty and Bridget had 2 children, 19-year-old Jake and 18-year-old Tessa, both thriving in college. Despite the material comforts, Ty realized that Bridget's disinterest in their love life was a significant issue. While Ty's lovemaking drive remained active, Bridget attributed her low libido to a temporary phase, promising to discuss it with her doctor during her next checkup, which was almost a year ago. Their love life hadn't improved, and Ty, frustrated, chose to let the matter rest without further discussion. The source of his concern was Bridget's frequent trips back to her hometown of Mansfield, Ohio. She explained it was due to her mother's declining health, and her sister Bianca, who lived there, needed assistance. Both still resided in Mansfield, and Bianca, divorced and alone, benefited from Bridget's stay during these visits. Bridget felt it was the least she could do to relieve Bianca and allow her some free time. These trips started 6 months ago and now occurred bi-weekly, with Bridget departing on Thursday morning and returning late Sunday night. She maintained communication by calling every evening at 9 and ensuring her cell was always accessible. However, this meant Ty spent 3 or 4 days alone every other week, a situation he now disliked. Bridget left this morning for her latest trip, leaving Ty alone again. Despite his disappointment, he revealed to Bridget that he was working on a big surprise, ready in a couple of weeks. He even attempted to pique her interest by mentioning Stacy's involvement, hoping her curiosity or even jealousy over Stacy would make her stay and find out the secret. Bridget showed minimal curiosity, and Ty, not surprised, let it go and left her to packing. After their usual goodbyes, Ty left for work, knowing she would be gone within the hour. Later that day, Ty closed up his office, chatted with Rachel, his secretary, and walked down the carpeted hall to Stacy's office for a conversation before heading home. He knocked once and pushed the door open, a habit accepted by all partners accustomed to his unannounced visits. Ty greeted Stacy and suggested they finish work for the day, offering to buy a drink. Stacy expressed her reluctance to go home to an empty house. Another colleague, Roger, was waiting for her as they planned to attend their son's school play, where Roger Jr. had the lead role in Pirates of Doom. Ty teased Stacy about the play, but acknowledged that parents are naturally biased when it comes to their children's performances. Stacy laughed and agreed. At 46, happily married for the past 10 years, she reassured Ty about the progress on the project and declined assistance from Jason, noting that everything was on track. Concerned about Ty's upcoming retirement, Stacy expressed her wish to talk him out of it, emphasizing that he had been the driving force behind the company's success. Ty complimented Stacy's contributions and assured her that she, along with Clay and the younger team members, would continue to excel. He praised the younger generation's dedication, particularly mentioning Jason and expressing the possibility of offering Alice Chambers a partnership in the future. Stacy expressed her liking for Jason and Alice and mentioned that Raj would also attend the upcoming party. Ty welcomed Raj and bid Stacy goodnight, planning to see her the next day. Ty drove to his estate home in the Columbus suburbs, situated on a 5-acre lot and encompassing just over 5,000 scaff. It featured a hot tub flowing into a pool, a cabana, 2 tennis courts, and a spacious garden with flowers and flowering shrubs, providing color throughout the summer and into the fall. With the departure of the kids, Bridget had let go of the cook and maid, leaving the house mostly empty. Acknowledging that it was too large for the two of them, Bridget agreed they hadn't committed to it, but suggested it was time to consider moving into something smaller. Maybe they should give it a couple more years, she proposed. Ty parked in the 4-car garage and entered the kitchen, where he placed a frozen dinner in the microwave before changing into casual clothes for the evening. Returning down the steps, he heard the landline ring, hoping it was related to one of his ads, as it was too early for Bridget to call. Answering the call, he was pleased to discuss his boat, a 32-foot powered sailboat moored at Lake Erie in the summer and fall, winter-stored at a facility on the lake. After a fruitful discussion with someone who had taken the boat for a run with the marina owner covering for Ty, the deal was finalized. An agreement was made to send a cashier's check for the agreed-upon price to a post office box number Ty provided. Once the check was received, the title to the boat would be available at the marina. The purchaser had reviewed the title when taking the boat out for a trial run. Everything was in place. Bridget, who had never liked the boat and hadn't been out with Ty in years, would be pleased. With the boat sold and his Jaguar and Audi promised to successful high bidders, there was little left to worry about. 2 weeks from today, everything would be in place for his retirement. The house might take time to sell, but by then, Ty and Bridget would be in the smaller bungalow, ready for showings. He had already moved some furniture there, and any additional pieces could be purchased as needed. Ty mechanically consumed the frozen dinner and decided to relax with mindless TV and snacks. Taking a bottle of cold Miller Lite to the entertainment room, he opted for adult content, contemplating the lack of imagination in the scenes as the actors repeated the same actions in the same way. The movie failed to arouse him enough to take matters into his own hands. While the film unfolded, Ty pondered why the actors all followed the same script, gazing into the camera without any imaginative flair, merely aiming for titillation. He lacked the enthusiasm to engage in personal activities. At 9, Bridget phoned, and Ty answered, asking about any issues getting there. Bridget assured him of an easy trip and mentioned that her mom was doing a little better, but her sister Bianca was stressed. She suggested staying an extra day if it was okay with Ty. Despite feeling a clench in his stomach, Ty dismissed the discomfort and agreed, telling Bridget to do what she thought was best. He mentioned that he would stay at work a little longer, as it was lonely without her. Ty also inquired about Monday, asking if she needed anything and noting that she didn't take much with her. Bridget explained that she had things left behind and assured Ty that she would be fine. She then brought up the surprise he had mentioned earlier, expressing anticipation to find out what it was. Ty, somewhat surprised by her interest, informed her that it was right on schedule, with Stacy almost done with her part, and the rest already in place. Bridget promised to call him tomorrow night and said goodnight, ending the call with a simple, "I love you." Observing Bridget's eagerness to end the calls quickly, Ty noted that she didn't reciprocate his "I love you" with more than a good night. Despite this, he smiled, attributing her quick endings to her potential busyness with her mother. Ty then reflected on Bridget's family dynamics, noting the dysfunction and his own lack of fondness for her mother and sister Bianca, who had been divorced for cheating. So, the rest of my weekend alone continues, Ty thought to himself to occupy himself. He called the kids, talked with them for an hour or more, reminding them of his summons for them to come down in 2 weeks, and then just let himself go. He fell asleep on the couch and woke during the middle of the night with a stiff neck. He went to bed and slept without dreams. That was unusual, but Ty welcomed it. Lately, his dreams had not been pleasant. The next 2 weeks passed as normal, with Ty working to finish all his cases and make sure Jason was up to speed on all of them. He spent most of that second week calling his clients and letting them know of his pending retirement. They were, for the most part, happy for him and willing to work with Jason. A few wanted assurances from either Stacy or Clayton, and he made sure they were contacted right away. Things were all in place by that final Thursday when Bridget left for Mansfield. Ty had managed to keep his pending retirement secret from Bridget as planned. She rarely asked about his work anymore, so it was not much of a problem. In addition, she had forgotten about the surprise, and Ty didn't bring it up again before she left. He would mention it Sunday morning when she called to tell him she was about to leave, especially if she decided to stay an extra day again. Either way, Ty was prepared. Friday marked Ty's ultimate day, filled with bustling activity. Collaborating with Rachel, they cleaned the house and transferred paper files to Jason. Following a few more phone calls, Ty instructed Rachel to shift all his new calls to Jason, aligning with his plan. Having assigned Jason his secretary, Rachel had experience working with her. Ty's last morning task was telling Stacy to set things in motion, and she affirmed readiness. Though she left for the courthouse later that morning, Stacy promised to return in time for the retirement party at the Radisson Hotel. Despite everyone knowing Bridget couldn't attend, it didn't delay the proceedings, promising an enjoyable time. Ty left immediately after lunch to address several necessary tasks, and by 3 that afternoon, everything was in place. The final papers for the house were signed, and movers were already on their way, committed to finishing by late Saturday afternoon. Once the movers finished, the crew Ty hired to clean the place thoroughly would arrive, with orders to complete the task by that evening. They were promised a bonus if they finished on time. Realtors assured Ty that the "For Sale" sign would be in the front yard by late tomorrow, revealing a listing of interested parties who wished to view the property starting the following Monday. To their satisfaction, Ty had competitively priced it for a quick sale. The last task for Ty was ensuring that all financial arrangements were in place. Bridget and he had 2 separate accounts, aside from the joint ones, each with their credit card. It was Ty's insistence that they carried only 1 card each, disapproving of running a credit balance. Bridget, adept at financial management, was never frivolous with money. She skillfully managed their accounts, aware of Ty's private business accounts managed by his company. Unaware of Ty's accounts at the firm, Bridget, over the years, had neither inquired nor remembered. Retiring, Ty closed all joint accounts carrying both their names, transferring the retirement account to a new brokerage. Ty intended to manage all their joint affairs in cash temporarily, or at least until they had settled on everything. Since the new home would be located outside the States, Ty moved the accounts beyond the U.S., having already opened an online account with an international bank with outlets in Europe and South America. Ty was confident that Bridget would easily adapt to the change, as she was very intelligent about money matters. Finally, Ty confirmed that the tickets were in hand, contemplating spending the next several months with Bridget in a beautiful Costa Rican resort. Sun, sand, swimming, sailing, horseback riding, they had it all. Ty, having made a solo trip to the resort to confirm its authenticity, instructed Rachel to book the trip and make the reservations, desiring everything to be confirmed by the time of his retirement. Tyson was quite prosperous, accumulating substantial wealth from handling high-profile cases for affluent clients, charging accordingly. His clients, recognizing his expertise, retained him with substantial retainers. Ty invested his earnings in high-risk accounts, yielding significant returns over the years. As a lawyer, he leveraged his legal knowledge to move most of his money into offshore accounts legally, without any agreements with the U.S. These accounts remained intact, unbeknownst to Bridget, adding an element of surprise. If she were aware, she would be astonished at their value. Importantly, this money was outside the States, not subject to U.S. tax laws or the U.S. courts, had ensured everyone in the firm kept it quiet. Despite Bridget suggesting retirement, it had been dropped over the past year. Ty believed his retirement would please her, given her complaints about the time he spent at work. He informed everyone that it would be a surprise for Bridget, with plans to announce everything on Sunday night when she returned. Ty was confident she would be home Sunday, intending to initiate the surprise during her morning call. So far, everything had gone perfectly. The party was enjoyable, with Ty dancing with all the women and talking to all the men, sharing war stories of their most interesting cases. Jason spent most of his time around Ty, ensuring nothing important escaped his notice. Ty thought highly of Jason, foreseeing him as a valuable asset to the firm. Stacy and Clay, privy to all his plans, were sworn to secrecy. As his attorneys, Stacy subtly expressed pleasure in what he was doing. Ty danced with her, discussing the final steps. Stacy assured Ty that everything was ready for the surprise, documenting checks and amounts to ensure Bridget's surprise and Ty's satisfaction. Ty expressed confidence in Bridget enjoying the surprise, and Stacy sarcastically whispered her agreement. Ty laughed and shared that he had tickets for a Costa Rica resort with plans to leave Sunday night. He promised to call her with a permanent number, but mentioned that his new cell would be active in the meantime. He suggested Roger and Stacy do something similar. Stacy replied that she enjoyed what she was doing too much to quit at the moment. Ty encouraged her to tell Clay that he was sorry for not including him in all their plans. Ty stayed at the party until almost midnight before leaving. He missed Bridget's call, but found a voicemail. Bridget informed Ty that she was going to her mom's that night, asking him not to call her there to avoid waking her mother. She explained that her mother was tired all the time and needed rest. Bridget promised to call the next night and asked Ty to be home. She bid him good night. As Ty expected, she wouldn't call tonight after leaving her message. He spent the evening packing his clothes and ensuring Bridget's belongings were neatly packed. With limited time before Sunday night, Ty aimed to avoid return trips after the movers finished tomorrow. Careful and methodical, he packed her things, ensuring a smooth process without room for complaints. He planned to stay at the bungalow tonight and ensure all calls were forwarded to his new cell, starting tomorrow. Once he had transferred everything to the bungalow, Ty wrapped up his tasks, made a phone call to confirm the last piece of the surprise was in place, and then went to bed. Pleasantly tired from the party and on edge, he hoped nothing would go wrong as he fell asleep. Saturday marked the packing and moving of the furniture from their home. Though somewhat sad, Ty shrugged his shoulders and left the movers to their work. He was going back to the bungalow to meet their kids, arriving right around noon, and Ty needed to go over his plans with them to avoid surprising them too much. He had given them a hint of his retirement, but withheld details about Costa Rica or anything else. Now was the time to bring them up to date. He had to extract promises from them not to call Bridget and spoil his surprise, thinking they would be okay with that. When they arrived, he welcomed them inside, sat them down to begin filling them in. Making it short and to the point, he answered all their questions and gave details when they asked for them. Neither Jake nor Tessa were happy with what he was doing, but he assured them that their college tuition was taken care of and that they would always be welcome home, wherever that was. He reassured them that his retirement was something both he and Bridget had discussed and agreed upon as the right time. They wanted to talk to Bridget, but he made them promise to wait until Sunday night. When she got home, they finally agreed. They all went out to dinner that evening and kept quiet when Ty answered the 9 o'clock call from Bridget. She kept it short, as usual, but didn't mention staying any longer, so he still expected her. Sunday night, after the call, the kids once again discussed his plans, wanting to be sure he still wanted to proceed. Ty assured them he was fine. When they went to sleep in the spare room with twin beds, he made a phone call to confirm the movers were done, and the cleaning crew was scheduled. Both were affirmative, and Ty was pleased. One final call, and he was done for the night. Sunday was a day when little had to be done, and most everything was ready. He checked the house and found all in place. The movers and cleaners had left the place spotless and ready to show. He drove back to the bungalow and waited for the call from Bridget, telling him she was ready to leave. He expected her to call at her normal time, between 10 and 10:30. The kids had gone out to be with some of their friends from home, so Ty was alone when she called. He answered after the first ring. Ty nervously asked Bridget if she was ready to start for home. She responded that she was just beginning and explained that she would like to stay a few more days to give her sister Bianca more time to do some things. Bridget's voice was strained, as if she expected Ty to object, well aware that he would not like her request. Ty heard the words, and for the first time felt the anger that he had been holding in check for the past several months, struggling to break free. She wanted to stay a few days longer. Why? Well, he knew now, didn't he? He had known for over 3 months now, long enough to begin planning his surprise. Now was the time to bring his surprise to the front. Now it was time to do what he had planned for the past 3 months. Once he found out for sure, now it was time. As he reached this decision, Ty's anger finally surfaced, having kept it in check for so long. With the anger making it difficult to speak without shouting, he responded to Bridget's request by expressing that he wouldn't mind her spending a few more nights, sarcastically referring to her lover, Kevin. Ty confronted her about her involvement with both Kevin and another man, Ben, stating that it bothered him. His voice rose in anger, and he struggled to restrain himself from screaming at her. Ty accused her of carrying on these relationships for the past 6 months or longer, expressing his frustration at having to pretend it was nothing. Silence followed from the other end, broken only by a sob, and then the phone went dead. Ty stared at the phone in his hand, as if it were a snake about to strike. He realized that Bridget had hung up, and that was an unexpected surprise. He finally placed the offending instrument on the table, his hand trembling with remaining anger. She hung up, and he had no outlet for his pent-up anger. As Ty slumped into the chair beside the table, his phone rang sharply. He stared at it uncomprehendingly as the sound reverberated from the walls. The disposable phone he had purchased for this purpose continued to ring, not having voicemail. Finally picking it up, he pushed the talk button. Yes, was all he could get out. His anger had burned out with the sudden end of it all. He had been primed for an argument or a shouting match, a screaming match between the cheating wife and her scorned husband. Her abrupt termination caught him by surprise and extinguished his anger like a bucket of water on a flame. Now he was numb, dead inside, and numb with the pain he had been holding back with his plan of action. Without the cathartic outlet for his anger and hurt, he was suddenly helpless to stop the piercing pain that clutched at his heart. Bianca's angry voice came through the tiny speaker, urging Ty not to hang up and expressing concern for Bridget, who was described as a wreck and almost hysterical. She questioned Ty about what he had said to Bridget and what he had done to cause her extreme reaction. Ty redirected his anger towards Bianca, viewing her as a full partner in Bridget's betrayal and as guilty as his cheating wife. He sarcastically informed Bianca that he had simply told Bridget to stay as long as she liked, to spend extra time with her lover, Kevin Clark. Ty accused both Bianca and Bridget of being involved with Ben Stinson and Kevin, detailing their rendezvous at a motel. He expressed anger, stopping himself from screaming at Bianca, and dismissed her plea for him to let Bridget explain. Bianca tried to defend Bridget, insisting it wasn't what Ty thought, and describing the situation as a stupid mistake for which she was equally at fault. She pleaded with Ty not to do anything drastic and urged him to wait until Bridget could talk to him. Ty, however, remained adamant, revealing that someone would be there when Bridget arrived, but it wouldn't be him. He accused Bridget of discarding their marriage and stated that she wanted to continue the affair with Kevin. Despite Bianca's pleas, Ty informed her that he had already told their children about the situation, including the weekends when Bridget claimed to be taking care of her mother. Ty asserted that the children had taken the news surprisingly well. In response to Bianca's desperate appeal for hope and reconsideration, Ty reiterated that it was Bridget and Bianca who had discarded their family. Ty bid goodbye to Bianca and mentioned saying goodbye to her mother, noting that she never liked him, and now she must be laughing her skinny buns off. Ty disconnected, then looked around the small bungalow for the last time. Bridget will love it, he thought to himself. Then he laughed at the thought. He turned off all the lights, put the spare keys on the table along with the letter to Bridget, and went out the front door. He pulled the door shut, got into his rental car, and drove to Rachel's apartment. She was waiting in front of the building for him as he pulled up. He got out, loaded her 3 suitcases into the back of the car, and then held the door as she climbed in. She smiled up at him as he shut the car door. He walked around to the driver's side and slid in. Rachel expressed her readiness for the situation, mentioning the challenge of seeing him every day at the firm without being able to touch or talk to him. She credited Bridget for throwing Ty away, allowing her to snap him up and enjoy their weekends together. They drove away from Bridget's story, and Rachel revealed that when she called Ty to ask if he minded her staying a couple more days, she had a strange feeling that it might not be a good idea. She shared her conversation with Bianca, who laughed at the idea of spending more nights with Kevin and Ben. Rachel admitted feeling a twinge of guilt when thinking about her time with both of them, but that guilt failed to survive her thoughts of lust. She described a thrill of wetness between her legs when recalling the moments with Kevin and Ben. I shuddered once and picked up the phone. The conversation started as usual, Ty asking me if I was coming home. He sounded so normal, reminding me that this was a world that Ty knew nothing about, and that gave me courage to do what I knew I wanted. I went for it, asking him if he minded if I stayed a couple of days. I looked at Bianca when I did, and her grin reassured me that I was doing the right thing. As I waited for his normal answer to do whatever made me happy, I thought once again to myself that Ty wouldn't mind, and he would never know what I was really doing. I would never let him find out because it would hurt him too much. I loved Ty. That was real. But lovemaking with him had lost its appeal to me, and now I had found an outlet that allowed me to continue to love my husband, but enjoy lovemaking with someone else. With him, I had found a wild side to myself that I never expected. I was thoroughly caught up in the illicit pleasure he gave me. I was pleased at myself, my own pleasure driving my lust to spend just 1 or even 2 more nights with Kevin and Ben. I was already imagining our night together, and I was becoming warm at the thought, until those words came out of the speaker and directly to my gut, destroying my world. Ty questioned why he should mind Bridget wanting to spend more nights with her lover Kevin, mentioning her involvement with both him and another guy, Ben. Ty expressed uncertainty about the duration, wondering if it had been 6 months or longer. He conveyed his frustration, feeling like he was supposed to pretend it was nothing. Bridget couldn't speak in response to Ty's accusations. I was frozen in fear and panic. I slammed the phone down, and I let out a loud sob. Just one, that's all. I was able to get out before it all became clear to me. Oh God, he knew, and my life was over. I was going to lose the only man I ever loved. I had to get home. I had to leave now to catch him before he had time to do something terrible. I grabbed my car keys and ran out of Bianca's kitchen. I started my car and backed out of her drive. I turned and headed toward the interstate and home. I had to get home. I had to. The drive usually took me 3.5 to 4 hours to make, but now I was pushing my car as fast as it would go. I was immune to any threat from the police who patrolled the interstate, and I cared nothing for speed limits. I had to get home before Ty had time to leave me. I had to talk to him, tell him that I loved him, and that I was a fool. I had done something stupid and selfish, but it didn't mean anything to me. Kevin and Ben were already gone. I'd never see them or Bianca again as long as I lived. I would tell him that I would give up everyone else if he would stay with me. Over and over, I rehearsed the words I would use to persuade him not to throw me away. I was seduced by Bianca and her lifestyle, and the lack of my lovemaking drive was a problem that she told me would disappear if I let myself go with someone who I didn't have to please or who I didn't care about. She convinced me that this would reawaken my lovemaking drive and that Ty would benefit. I was just going to try to get my drive back. But then I was seduced by the lust and the thrill of doing something nasty. It would revive me, and I would carry that back to my marriage bed with my husband. I was pleased at that. It would work. Ty would listen. He had to. 100 miles later, I asked the question Ty would ask. Why didn't any of that lust carry over? Why had we not made love in those 6 months since I had begun my affair? That was a question I had no answer for. I had to think of one. I had to think. I was still trying to find the words to answer that question. When I pulled into the driveway of our home, I was surprised to see 4 cars sitting in our driveway. I recognized the 2 cars belonging to my children, and I was surprised to see them there. But almost as quickly, a feeling of dread crept over me at their presence. I drove around them onto the grass and slid to a stop and clambered out of my car to run toward the house. As I did, I saw someone get out of one of the strange cars and move to intercept me at the front door. I ignored this man and reached for my keys. He tried to stop me, but I pushed him aside and slid my key into the lock. It didn't work. I tried again, over and over, but it wouldn't work. I threw it on the porch and held my face in my hands and began crying. I turned to the door and began pounding on it with my fists. I pounded until the pain in my hands forced me to stop. I looked around to see the man who got out of the car still standing there. He asked me if I was Mrs. Tyson Summers, and I nodded my head yes. He handed me an envelope and said in a low voice, "You are served, madam." He then took another, smaller envelope and handed that to me. "These are the keys to your new residence. The address is inside, and the property is yours without burden. You will find the deed and the necessary information inside." I took both envelopes and just stared at him. My mind was numb with sadness and pain. He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a legal-sized white envelope. This contains several checks amounting to the current savings and checking accounts, which have been closed. This house has been listed for sale, and the proceeds will go to you once the sale is completed. All of this is included in the divorce statements, and the terms are spelled out very clearly. The man closed his briefcase and prepared to leave. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a business card. "In case you've forgotten, this is the name of your husband's attorney." He moved away and got into his car. He spoke to the person sitting in the other car I didn't recognize before backing out and leaving. I was stunned. Holding the envelopes that the man had given me, I glanced down at the business card and saw that it was Stacy Reinhardt. That name caused a bolt of anger to course down my back, but it quickly died. Stacy was a problem only in my own head. I knew that, but I had used it over the years as a wedge to make Ty feel guilty. Now I knew better. But it didn't help to look up and see her walking toward me. "Hello, Bridget. You're not looking so well today. I just wanted to give you a heads up. Ty asked me to handle things in his absence. In case you're wondering and have lots of questions, I can give you some answers. First, Ty retired effective Friday. We all had a party for him. It was a great party, and lots of people came to see him off. Too bad you missed it. But then, you had other things more important, didn't you? Second, this house has been turned over to a realtor for sale. You signed your name to a power of attorney some time ago, and Ty used it to transfer the title into his name. But don't worry, the proceeds are all for you. Ty left it to you in the divorce. He also bought you a nice bungalow, paid for and furnished. Your children can take you there. Finally, Ty gave me full power to act in his behalf in the divorce and all his affairs here in the States. Ty has left the country, and I believe it is his intention not to return for some time." She stood there watching me as I digested the things she told me. It was as if each was a hammer that pounded the stake in my heart deeper and deeper. I was almost gasping for breath at the suddenness with which my life had collapsed in on me. I opened my mouth to ask questions, but nothing came out. I realized that I was smacked by a man whom I had blindly betrayed and disrespected so easily. A man that I knew in my heart was the only man I could ever love. Now I had lost his love, and I had no idea what to do. Suddenly, I was more alone than I had been over the last 20 years. I had my children and my life, but my anchor to all I cared about in this world had left me. I had never felt so alone in my life. I can't know why you did this to Tyson, Bridget. I know from working with him for the last 15 years that he loved you and his children more than anything in this life. When he found out what you were doing, it almost homicided him. Roger and I helped him through the crisis he was in and made sure he stayed calm enough to make plans to deal with you. We made sure he didn't do anything foolish. Just so you know, he considered self-damage, but we talked him out of it by reminding him of your children. He's with someone else. Now that also helped him through the crisis you caused by your actions. It's not important who she is, just that she is with him and will care for him as this slowly runs its course. Tyson will not agree to talk to you, and he doesn't care if you fight the divorce. That will be in my hands, not his. So do what you will. Just know that Tyson is out of your life and will never be back. She turned and walked back to her car. Without looking back, she got into the passenger side of the car, and it left. I walked slowly down the drive to my children, who were standing together beside the cars. I had to face them and listen to their anger and condemnation. But I really didn't care anymore. I had betrayed my husband, their father, and I had lost him, and nothing else mattered. Their anger at me would not make any difference. Nothing they could say or do could hurt any more than the words I heard from Ty just that morning. God, how they hurt. And all he did was state the truth as he saw it. As I stopped in front of Jake and Tessa, my grief brought me to my knees. Jake reached down and helped me to stand, but there was no concern on his face. As I looked at him, I saw anger, disgust, disappointment, but no concern. That was painful to me, and I began to sob. And instead of holding me, my daughter stood in front of me with her arms crossed over her chest and her face mirroring that of her brother. I had told myself that I couldn't hurt any worse after losing Ty in my marriage. But the looks on the faces of my children told me in no uncertain terms exactly how they saw what I did, and it was even worse. I cried for what I had lost. As my children stood by and waited, they offered no comfort. I had lost them as well. I turned and looked once more at the home Ty and I had purchased to build our family. I loved that house and had always felt pride when I came home. Now it was gone. Everything was gone. My husband, my marriage, the love of my children, and the home we shared. What have I done? Why did I never think of the consequences of my actions? Why had I never considered that? I knew now consequences are a whinge.